Hi, and welcome to In Search of Insight, Nootropics Depot's monthly podcast. I'm your podcast host, Erica, and sitting next to me is our product specialist at Nootropics Depot, Emil.
Hey everyone.
And today we are excited to welcome back our science director at Nootropics Depot, Ellie, who is actually in a new location. Ellie, tell us where you are.
Hey, I'm happy to be back. Today I'm joining from our lab in Tempe, Arizona. So, joining from the office, good to be in person. So, pretty exciting to be here.
Awesome.
Nice. Any fun projects you're working on at the office right now?
We're doing a lot of R&D stuff. So, when I come in person, it's a great opportunity to kind of do some hands-on work with the cell culture room. That's the biggest push right now, as well as our mushroom tent. So, we have a mushroom tent in the office where we do a lot of R&D on how do we optimize the bioactives in mushrooms and grow them the best way. So it's cool to get to be in person to really help out with that a little bit more.
Nice. And
Awesome.
for those who don't know what a cell culture lab is, so you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So the cell culture lab was kind of my project that I started when I joined the company of building a lab where we can study human cells. So we're studying the effects of a lot of our products on actual human cells to kind of back up the claims that we're seeing in the literature, as well as find new potential bioactive properties of botanicals that haven't been studied yet. So it's really kind of expanding the R&D we can do and supporting the research that we've been citing for years.
Nice.
That's really cool. Now, I have a question. Are these cells coming from particular organs?
Yes, so right now we're studying a human intestinal cell line. So our primary goal is to study healthy human cells. A lot of the literature you read is in either cancer cells or cells that are from a disease state, and that's because they're easier to grow and to kind of, those cells need to be fixed in some ways. Whereas in the dietary supplement space, we're more interested in healthy human cells instead of the disease state. So we're studying intestinal cells to see how our products affect healthy intestinal barriers and intestinal kind of functions.
Okay, really cool. And today we're not going to be talking necessarily about the cell culture project, but I'm sure we can get a little bit into bioavailability, which is also, I think, connected to what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And the actual topic for today, as you can see in the title, we're going to be talking about Nootropics Depot's four different ashwagandha supplements and why we all have taken ashwagandha, why it's a part of our stack, and why you might be interested in taking it yourself if you haven't already, or perhaps a new variety, a new product of ashwagandha that might be a better fit for your current needs, because through the four, there's actually a lot of differences and
Hmm.
some benefits that are specific to each one.
And like we normally do, we're also going to take some ashwagandha. And my favorite is Shodan, so I suggest that we take Shodan. And yeah, Ellie's got some Shodan too. So let's take a little bit of Shodan. Shodan, just to give a bit of background, I think is one of the strongest ashwagandha extracts on the market. But what I find unique about it is that it's strong, but it also has a wide variety of with analytes. And that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast. Together with the people who developed Shodan, we developed an analytical method with them, which really expands the amount of with analytes we can look at. This gives us much deeper insights into what's going on in ashwagandha, and it also gives us a much more accurate picture of the amount of bioactives that are in there. With the Shodan method, the amount of with analytes is higher than with other methods like the USP method and the AOAC method. But we're going to get into all of that a little bit later in the podcast for those who really want to nerd out and get deep into analytical chemistry. But if that's not your cup of tea, the first part of the podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of ashwagandha, the different extracts, the different effects it can have, why you might want to take some, why you might want to be careful taking some. Just kind of going over all of the ins and outs. And I think once we get into the analytical chemistry part, we'll start feeling the effects so we can take a little bit of a break, talk about how it's feeling, and then really get into the thick of it. So without further ado, let's take some of this.
And I'm just going to ask you, even though I secretly know the answer, why are we taking Shodan of the four ashwagandhas? How yeah, just tell me what's on your mind.
So for me, we started taking ashwagandha. Actually, I started taking ashwagandha a really long time ago when I was in college. I was feeling really stressed out. I wasn't sleeping that well. I was kind of just overactivated all the time. I needed something to calm me down. I did a bunch of research. Ashwagandha came up. So I just went to the grocery store, bought a random ashwagandha at the time. At the time, I wasn't really aware of the state of the industry, but I do think I got a pretty decent extract. It was from a Canadian company. I forget the name of it, but they seem to be a pretty well-renowned company. So I took some of it and kind of felt like a normal person, could sleep well. My stress levels were lower. I could pay more attention in class. But then I started also getting a little bit tired and I added some Alcar to it. So that was my first stack, Alcar and ashwagandha, and that got me through my first year of college. And then as the years went on, we kept taking, well, once I met you, you started taking ashwagandha
Yeah.
too, and we've been taking ashwagandha a lot together. And when I was taking ashwagandha, when we were first at Nootropics Depot, Shodan didn't exist yet. This is a pretty new extract. So first we started with kind of the industry standard KSM 66. It's probably everyone has heard of it. It's a really popular ashwagandha extract and for good reason too. And then we played around a little bit with Sensoril, which is more calming, a little bit better for sleep. And then when Shodan came out, I tried it and it really just fit with me. It had kind of the positives of KSM 66 and the positives of Sensoril. So I didn't really have to choose between them anymore. And I felt that longer term Shodan was the best fit for me. And we can also maybe get a little bit into why some of my theories as to why that is. I think it has something to do with Wertherferin A, which is a bit of a controversial topic here, as we'll get into. But yeah, that's why I selected Shodan, and it just has such high withanolide levels. It has a pretty potent effect, so I think maybe this is the best way to show what ashwagandha is doing. I haven't taken ashwagandha in a few months, neither have you, so should have a pretty significant effect.
Cool.
So. Cheers.
Shall we? And Ellie, have you taken Shodan before?
I actually haven't taken Shodan, so I'm really excited to
Mm,
try it.
Okay.
Yeah, my story with my first taking ashwagandha is actually very similar to Emil's. I was first year in college, really stressed out, like working a bunch of jobs, but I was also weightlifting a lot. It was kind of my first year of powerlifting, and I heard somewhere in the gym or something that ashwagandha can help with muscle stress and recovery. And so I was taking it both for mental stress support and helping focus in class and kind of recovery as well as muscle recovery. And I definitely noticed the effects with kind of my stress levels and focus and attention, but I don't really know if I was feeling the muscle effects. So maybe that's something we can talk about too.
mm.
Um, that could have just been something I heard someone in the gym say. But I tried it and it was actually the first like herbal supplement I ever remember taking. So it kind of kickstarted my whole journey to where we are now.
Nice.
Nice.
Do you remember if it was like KSM 66 or something more generic?
I think it was something more generic. I'm sure I got it at just like a drugstore or a GNC kind of situation, or
Yeah.
maybe even bodybuilding.com,
Yeah. Oh
kind of
man,
classic
those were the
starter.
days. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's a lot of cool ashwagandha extracts out there, and it's interesting how different they all feel. Which I think can be explained by the withanolides. I think there's also some other stuff going on. Um, I think one thing we should really talk about is kind of the different parts of ashwagandha, as that there's some controversy around that. And Shodan has both the leaves and the roots. Sensoril has both the leaves and the roots. Our generic ashwagandha has both the leaves and the roots. But KSM 66 is very adamant about only having the roots. They think that's more of a traditional use. And one of the reasons that they cite this too is that in the leaves there is some Wertherferin A, which they've done a pretty smart job with their marketing because they found somewhere in a study that it's cytotoxic. Now they left off the cyto part of it, and they're going around everywhere telling people withaferin A is toxic.
Mm.
I kind of want to talk about that a little bit because if we look at Shodan in a minute, at some of the analytical data, we'll see that the withaferin A levels can be quite high. Um, but I think this is unique. So with the Farron A, it's cytotoxic, but specifically to cancer cells. It doesn't seem to be cytotoxic or not as cytotoxic to normal human cells. And this research is being done at very high dosage levels. And I think maybe Ellie can tell us a little bit about that too. If you're looking at these human cell line studies or isolated cells, I think the concentrations of active compounds usually are quite a bit higher than we might see with active, like normal supplementation. Is that a correct assessment?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And I dove into the literature a little bit surrounding with the Farron A, and from my interpretation of the data I could find, with the Farron A was cytotoxic to cancer cells, but there's no evidence that it's toxic to healthy cells.
Mhm.
And it seems like there are studies that actually looked at with the Farron A isolated at a pretty high concentration
Yeah.
on healthy cells and didn't see an effect, as well as ashwagandha leaf extracts, which are high in withaferin A
Mhm.
compared to root extracts. And there wasn't a difference in cellular toxicity on healthy cells. So there's not that many studies in general. I think the way that some of the stuff is marketed makes it seem like there's a whole loads of research surrounding this, but there's only a handful of studies looking at this at all. And
Mhm.
most of the studies I saw pointed to there's no effects on healthy cells. So they're not toxic to a healthy body.
Mhm.
But that being said, that's in a cell line. It's not always in human studies, but there is also human studies as well, and rat studies and mouse studies.
Yeah.
So all of the evidence points to with the Farron A is fine to take if you're healthy. And in general, if you're not healthy, you should probably consult a doctor anyways. So,
Absolutely. Uh, and I actually saw a clinical trial on humans using isolated withaferin A. They used 200 milligrams of withaferin A per dose as their high dose. And they saw like some skin rashes and a slight elevation in liver enzymes. But this is really high, like 200 milligrams of withaferin A is like 100 times more probably than you're getting in an average
yeah,
dose.
Mm.
to
And
put
they
that in context, Shodan is the highest with analyte content ashwagandha we've tested, and the withaferin A is typically the highest concentration with analyte, but there's only maybe 70 milligrams total of with analytes for a 120 milligram dose. So there, you're never going to reach that 200 milligrams with the Farron A level.
And even at that level, they saw some minor inconveniences, right? Like a little bit of
Mhm.
an elevation in liver enzymes is never a good thing, but you are mega dosing a compound that a company is saying is highly toxic.
Mhm.
Um, and all we're seeing is a little bit of an elevation in liver enzymes and a skin rash in some people. I would say that means at normal doses, when we're talking about like maybe 20 milligrams or so at the most, it's safe. And I think it's very beneficial. I think one thing maybe many of you have heard about, and that's maybe something we can get out of the way right away, is that ashwagandha can cause anhedonia. And that this anhedonia is irreversible and it's going to ruin your life. There's some influences out there that really have made their whole thing about telling people how dangerous ashwagandha is because they've had a negative experience with it. And there seems to be some corroboration on Reddit that other people have experienced some anhedonia. Most of these cases, people experience a little bit of anhedonia, they stop taking it, goes away. In other cases, the anhedonia seems to last for a really long time. Now, I've been trying to figure this out for a really long time. I have experienced it myself too. So it is something that can happen. And this is why I was saying at the beginning, we'll also kind of go over maybe points in time when you don't want to be taking ashwagandha. And ashwagandha, its main mode of action is that it reduces cortisol levels, and it does so quite significantly. This is why it's good for stress, and it will relax you, but if you don't have a whole lot going on in your life, if you're maybe just sitting at home watching TV, there's not much excitement in your life, and you think, oh, maybe ashwagandha will give me some of a mood boost, it will make me feel relaxed, maybe it will help me with my social anxiety and I can go out of the door again. If you take ashwagandha in a scenario like that, your already low cortisol levels are lowering your mood. Then you make that cortisol level even lower, and then you really start getting into this anhedonia, unmotivated feeling. And I've experienced this too. Um, I can only take ashwagandha when I have a lot of stress in my life. So we take it when stress is high.
Hmm.
Like when we were moving from the US back to the Netherlands, that was a high stress period. I was taking a lot of ashwagandha. Once we got settled in and that stress level started to fade away, I started feeling that anhedonia creeping in. So I just stopped taking it. Um, this is something that you want to take for stress. It's not something you just want to take if you're not stressed. And I think this is where a lot of that anhedonia comes from. And there's a lot of theories floating around. This influencer is very focused on the serotonergic aspect of it. They think it mimics. I guess we can't really talk about that. It mimics a medication side effect that we won't talk about. But I don't think it has much to do with serotonin. There's a very simple explanation for the anhedonia. When cortisol levels are low, tyrosine hydroxylase, the enzyme that turns L-tyrosine from our food into L-dopa and then that L-dopa into dopamine, that enzyme level goes down. So low cortisol means you have lower dopamine. Low dopamine means you usually don't have much motivation. And you see this in a lot of people with low motivation, anhedonia, things like that. When you analyze what's going on with them, usually their dopamine levels are a little bit lower. So if you don't have a whole lot of stress going on in your life and you take a powerful cortisol reducer, you're negatively impacting your dopaminergic system. It also seems over time with low cortisol levels, your dopamine D1 and D2 levels start going down, the receptor density. That's also not good, of course, for motivation and can lead to some anhedonia type of effects. This is where Wertherferin A comes in. It seems to increase the levels of dopamine a little bit. So that might be helping to balance things out. It also seems to be a COMT inhibitor. This is an enzyme that also plays a role in dopamine production and um, degradation of dopamine. So having it act as a COMT inhibitor can maybe also spare some of that dopamine. And I think that's why I notice for myself, at least with KSM-66, that anhedonia effect creeps in much quicker. With Shodan, there's a much longer period where I don't notice it and it starts to creep up on me a little bit slower. And then that gives me more of an opportunity to stop it when my stress levels have dropped. So I think that that kind of explains what's happening for a lot of people. Now, another thing that could be happening, and I think this is a really interesting theory that I actually kind of came up with this afternoon. So it is still in development, but it, stress is an interesting thing. If you have a jolt of stress when you're feeling a little bit down, like maybe life is a little bit boring and all of a sudden you're given a big assignment and that deadline is approaching really quick and you get this jolt of like, oh, I need to get it done. I need to be more motivated. I really need to get working now. That usually results in a motivation boost, it results in a bit of a mood boost, and it masks whatever might be going on in your life. So
Mm.
if you're already having a low mood, if you're already having anhedonia, and then the stress period hits you, and then all of a sudden you feel really good, but then you're also like, oh man, I'm feeling really stressed. I should go take a stress reducing supplement. You take ashwagandha, and now that thing that was masking your low mood and your low motivation is gone. And now your low mood and motivation is back. And you can blame it on ashwagandha because, in a sense, it's doing it, but it's just unmasking something that was already there and was getting masked by cortisol. And I think this is why some people uh, seem to notice a longer lasting anhedonia, low mood effect because it's always been there. There was just something going on in their life that stressed them out enough that they went and sought out ashwagandha, took it, and then that thing that was masking their issues is now gone, and now you're back to your normal state. which
Hmm.
isn't good. So,
So I guess a quick kind of takeaway from this initial part of the podcast is that if you're not experiencing pretty significant stress and you do have a bit of difficulty with motivation, then ashwagandha is probably not the right product to take. Even if you are looking for something kind of calming on a daily basis, there might be other alternatives that would work better and would not cause this same kind of intense sort of taking away that mask.
correct. And
What are some like quick kind of lighter options? If you were thinking, oh, I'm kind of stressed, but I struggle with motivation. What would you recommend for someone as an alternative, just to
I
start out?
I would say if you're mildly stressed
Mm-hmm.
and you're feeling motivated and you're feeling focused and your mood's good, don't do anything. Just keep going. And maybe if you're feeling a little bit unmotivated, don't take something calming. Take something a little bit stimulating, like Suboxone. Maybe have another cup of coffee. Don't necessarily go straight to the really calming stuff because it will probably take away what little motivation you still had left, which isn't a great thing. Um, Now I do just want to say, like, what is the prevalence of this anhedonia? So of course people report negative effects more than they report positive effects. So, and the more negative those effects are, the more attention they generate on public fora, such as Reddit, where we spend a lot of our time. So, one person will get on there and be like, "My life was ruined by ashwagandha. I was totally fine before it. I took it, and now my life is over. You guys should never take it. It's the devil. It's really bad." And then they start making YouTube videos about it, and then they get a lot of views, and then other influencers think, hey, this is a good thing to capitalize on. And then they get more and more views, and now there's a bunch of YouTubers out there that have this kind of same thing going on. But what they don't realize is that there's a lot of human clinical trials on ashwagandha, and this has included thousands of people. And in none of those studies did they report depressive or anhedonic effects. So, based on that, and based on the fact that ashwagandha is the most popular botanical supplement, I think it we are selling a lot of ashwagandha, and everyone else is selling even more ashwagandha than we are. If everyone who took it had their life ruined by it and anhedonia and blah 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 blah, it wouldn't sell. Everyone would be walking around like a zombie. Everyone would not get any work done. They would just be
Mhm.
sitting at home getting fat and miserable. And that just isn't the case. A lot of people, like myself, Erica, and Ellie, have had positive, life-changing effects sometimes with ashwagandha. I know for sure, for me, if I wasn't taking ashwagandha in college, I probably wouldn't have done as well as I did. So keep that in mind if you read these horror stories on Reddit. It's probably like 0.0000001% of people who've tried ashwagandha have that effect, and it's probably something that was already going on, or they just took it during an inappropriate time. Um, that
Mhm.
being said, it could happen, so be mindful of it. If you feel your motivation going down, if you feel your mood going down, maybe lay off for a little bit and start it back up when something stressful happens. Um, Now, with that out of the way, I think we should go into the positive effects.
For sure.
Ellie,
Right.
what do you like about ashwagandha? Why do you take it? Yeah, what do you experience with it?
Yeah, for me, I get very stressed out very easily. I'm like have the opposite problem of no motivation. I take on too many projects and kind of never chill out ever. And so it's nice to have something that I can take that kind of alleviate some of that stress. So when I am really motivated, there's a lot of goals I have. I like to accomplish a lot. And I think a lot of our listeners and viewers are probably the same way. People get brought into this kind of community for a reason. A lot of people are very highly motivated and want to make the most of their life. Sometimes that leads to really stressful kind of commitments and time. And so ashwagandha has helped me just be able to manage that a little bit more and kind of approach the commitments I've made and the task at hand with a lot calmer attitude instead of like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I have to do right now, and more of a, I want to do this, I get to do this, and kind of approach the situation with a more level head. than when I feel like times that I have the same amount of commitments or stress, not taking ashwagandha, I can feel the difference in just my mindset towards the stress that I have. It doesn't take the stress away, but it makes approaching the situations a lot easier.
That's great. And I think that's why a lot of people take it. And it has clinically studied effects for this too. If you
Mhm.
look at nervousness and things like that, it's reduced and it's really reduced at clinical marker scales. There's a lot of research in this. And of course, there's a lot of research into ashwagandha because there's a lot of money to be made with ashwagandha, which means there's a lot of money to fund research. Another
Mhm.
thing, if you see a lot of research on something, it means it's making someone a lot of money. These ashwagandha farmers, extractors, it has to work for them to be financially successful.
Mhm.
And financially successful businesses can do research, like us, with the cell culture. You can keep putting more and more money into research and development. And I think that's what makes ashwagandha so cool. There's really a lot of evidence and like 4,000 years of human use showing that the stuff works and works really well. Uh,
And where
Mhm.
is most of the ashwagandha being grown in the world
in
in source
India,
form?
they even call ashwagandha Indian ginseng, but then I was reading an article which I found kind of funny that it should actually be the other way around because ashwagandha might have had even more use. It might even be better at doing some of the ginseng stuff than ginseng itself. So
They
these
could have called it Chinese ashwagandha,
and that's what they recommended. But then I looked a little bit further and I realized I was reading KSM 66 marketing materials. These
which are
guys
from
are
Mm.
India.
really, they're from India.
Yeah.
They're really good at marketing. And let me pull it up. This is KSM 66. Let's just talk about KSM 66.
Yeah. So out of the four, this is the one that we're going to start with.
This is the one we're going to start with because it most closely resembles what traditional consumption would look like. So KSM 66, they have their own ashwagandha farm, they have their own extraction facilities, so they can really control the whole process. And they've decided to use a unique extraction methodology. If you've ever looked at a bottle of our KSM 66, you'll see that it says contains milk allergens. And that's because KSM 66 is partially being extracted with milk. Milk is a solvent that was being used traditionally to extract ashwagandha, so they use that as their solvent. KSM 66 has also recently started making one without the milk, and I've heard from many people who have tried that one, it does not feel at all like KSM 66 extracted with milk. I think
Hmm.
that's interesting to mention because basically what they've always said with KSM 66 is we're able to concentrate the compounds with this technology, but they don't really change in their proportion to each other. So the proportion of bioactive compounds in here closely resembles the bioactives in the actual root. So it's like you're taking just unextracted root, but with more concentrated. So you can just take a capsule instead of having to take a lot of powder, like here, I've actually got a bag of shredded roots, so you can kind of see what it looks like.
Which you've also made your own extract out of.
Let's see, can we see it?
Yeah.
Or
Mhm.
maybe I have to be a bit more back. That's what ashwagandha roots look like.
How does it smell? Ooh,
Smells kind of rooty.
yeah. Smells like slightly bitter wood.
Yes.
Smells like something that's not going to taste very good.
And out of that, I made my own extract. This one I did with 60% ethanol and 40% water, and it feels nothing like the water extracted. Very different. Feels a little bit more like some of the other ashwagandha extracts. So I think that's interesting. Depending on what solvent you use, the effects can be really different. And that's something that makes KSM 66 unique.
And
Uh,
I know we're going to talk about analytical chemistry later, but I can't hold myself back. Just a quick explanation. So different solvents are, by solvents, we're talking about like ethanol or water, and these are, you know, water is a bunch of H2O2 molecules, and ethanol is a bunch of alcohol molecules. And these different molecules interact with the bioactives in the root or the leaves or whatever you're extracting in different ways. So different solvents pull out different bioactives in different proportions or in different efficiencies. And that's why the solvent extraction, the type of solvent and the temperature and the timing all matters because it pulls out different concentrations of the bioactives. So traditional preparations might have a different concentration of these bioactives than Emil's ethanol water extract, even though they're coming from the exact same starting material. And that's why we sell four different products, is because we have four different extraction methods or four different combinations of roots and leaves and solvents to change the bioactive profile of the same starting material. And that's why we can see differences in the way that they feel and affect our bodies.
And that's why we carry four different ashwagandha extracts, because especially for ashwagandha, there seems to be a lot of differences between the different extracts. I think another factor that complicates this, of course, too, is not every plant is going to produce the same amount of bioactives. It kind of
Mhm.
depends what region of the world it's being grown in, what cultivar it is, what your soil chemistry looks like, what the weather patterns look like,
If
what your
anyone saw the last podcast that we did with Ellie, I'm pretty sure this was our last podcast. We talked about just the differences in a plant that's grown under different kinds of environments or inside or outside, and just all of the different variables that make it difficult to identify a plant. This is also the case for every single plant, also for ashwagandha.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, definitely for ashwagandha. I had one extract, this was years ago. We analyzed it and it had a whole lot of 12-deoxy with monolite in it. And it felt really unique. We've never been able to find anything else with high 12-deoxy with monolite. It was just a sample. When they
Mhm.
sent us more, it didn't have it. I did some research in it, and it seems that depending on when you harvest it and at what location it's being harvested, you could have very high 12-deoxy with monolite levels. So that's just one example. But of course, these companies who spend a lot of money and time developing their processes, developing their extracts, developing their farming practices, they can also have control over, oh, maybe we use this cultivar, maybe we planted in this field instead of that field, maybe we go a bit more to the north of India with some lower temperatures, or we go more south where it's warmer and more humid, and then we get different profiles. And maybe we take some from the north and some from the south and we blend it all up. So there's a lot of differences possible there, which
Mhm.
really makes all of the different ashwagandha extracts feel really different. And of course, KSM66 is roots only, so you're only getting the compounds that are in the roots. When you add the leaves into the mix, which Sensoril, Shodan, and our generic ashwagandha does, then you add some other compounds. Most of it is the same. You have most of the same with analytes in the leaves than in the roots. You have more with the ferrin A in the leaves. This is why KSM66 says we don't use the leaves. They also say that the leaves have never been used internally traditionally. That's false, by the way. I did some research on that. There's ample use of the leaves internally as well as topically. So traditionally, there has been a lot of use, although the roots are more common. But what's really interesting about the leaves is that beyond the withanolides, there's also a compound in there called triethylene glycol, which kind of sounds like propylene glycol or something like that, but it's a naturally occurring compound and it occurs in the leaves. And a recent study from a few years ago showed that that compound, shortened TEG or TEG, induces non-REM sleep. So kind of deep sleep, the more rejuvenating sleep, and it helps induce sleep. And what's interesting, and let me grab it, Sensoril, which has the leaves in there, and probably quite a bit of the leaves, it's really good at inducing sleep, better than KSM66. Our camera quickly turned off, but we're back. So we were discussing the differences between KSM66 and Sensural in terms of sleep. They both have human clinical data showing that they both help enhance sleep quality. Although anecdotally, from what I can tell, what many of our customers can tell, is that Sensural is the better one for sleep. And if you look around on Reddit, a lot of people will say this is the one you want to go for if you want a good night of sleep. And I think that triethylene glycol compound, the TEG, definitely is playing a role there. So we've got leaves in here, we don't have leaves in here. The withanolides help with sleep, the TEG helps a little bit more. So something with leaves in there seems to work. Although I do have to say, Shodan also has leaves in it, but Sensoril is still better than Shodan, in my opinion, just purely for sleep. So whatever that might be caused by, maybe it's a cultivar they use, maybe they use more of the leaves than Shodan does. We can't know for sure. This is their proprietary process, so they're not going to tell us exactly what proportion of leaves they're using and what proportion of roots, and how it's being blended. And but it would be interesting at some point because I think triethylene glycol is probably a somewhat easy compound to acquire and maybe test for. That maybe we could at some point see what are the tag levels in some of the different ones. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get more here, but of course that's just theoretical guesses. Um, but based on how this one feels, it's nice. That's also why we didn't take this one on the podcast because I don't want to get sleepy. KSM 66 is a bit more uplifting. I would say this is a nice one for during the day. And I also noticed that with my own extract, which is only roots, it's really calming, but it doesn't necessarily make me sleepy. I think that's where Shodan really shines because you get some of that extra calming from the leaves, perhaps, but it doesn't necessarily make you sleepy. It's still a nice, uplifting, good daytime one. So I think you get a really good overall picture of what it's doing with a high amount of with analytes, high potency, it kicks in quick, it works really well. So, but that's the difference between Sensoril and KSM 66, basically,
More from like a perceptible benefits
from a perceptible
standpoint.
benefits.
What are the extracts or what are the solvents that are used to make both of these extracts? Milk for the KSM
So
66?
I think milk and water and milk, of course, is a really interesting solvent. Like Ellie was just saying,
Mhm.
when you use water, you have a bunch of H2O molecules. When you use ethanol, you have a bunch of ethanol. But milk, I mean, that's a complex
Yeah.
matrix, right?
My guess, this is pure speculation, but my guess would be the proteins and the lipids in the milk
Yeah.
do something. We'll put something out that way because
Mhm.
you don't have protein in water. You don't have protein in ethanol. So that would be my guess. This is some kind of the like fatty protein lipid mixture that is interacting with compounds in a totally different way.
Yeah. I think so too. And of course, some of these compounds are lipid soluble.
Hmm.
Maybe you would know this better, but things that dissolve in ethanol would also dissolve in fats, right?
I would
Usually.
think so.
Yeah.
Hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
And that also kind of speaks of we standardize our products too with analytes, which are the main bioactives in ashwagandha, but they're not the only compounds. So even though we can know that Shodan has the highest level of with analytes, that's not to say it has the highest level of bioactives available because we're not measuring everything. And so each of these solvents is going to pull out different classes of compounds, even if we don't know exactly what those are.
Yeah. And that's also kind of fun, I think, about botanical supplements and extractions. It's oftentimes more an art than a science, but that's also really frustrating, especially for our lab when we're trying to figure out why does this feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see in a second some chromatograms, and it will give us some clues maybe as to what's going on. Oh, we see a bunch more peaks happening in this one than in this one, and maybe we can say, okay, maybe based on the more bioactives here, there's maybe a more interesting effect going on. That's
Mm-hmm.
something we do oftentimes notice just from a bioassaying standpoint when you have something that's really concentrated for one bioactive. Let me pull up, for example, our horny goatweed extract for an example. The 50% Icarin extract, I don't really feel a whole lot from it, except that it is a good blood flow enhancer. But the 10% Icarin extract is relaxing because there's some other stuff in there. And if we look at the chromatograms, there's more happening in the 10% than in the 50%. It's the same thing for Tonga Ali. So you can also kind of steer your experience that way. Shodan is going to be maybe more heavy on the with analytes because if you're concentrating that many with analytes, there's maybe not a whole lot of extra room for other compounds. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you want to have like almost 50% with analytes at some point, some of these other compounds have to take a back seat and they're not going to get pulled over, or if they're they got a really specific process for pulling out the withanalyzed, and that might not pull out some of these other compounds. And that's a way in which you can really steer the effects, and especially if you're taking it and bioassaying and having some discussion about how it feels and maybe tailoring your extraction or your procurement of the raw ingredients for the extraction that way, which I think the people behind Shodan are doing. They're very similar to us. They really nerd out about their products. They really love their products. They take their own products. They developed a whole analytical method with us about it. It's a really cool product. But I'll shut up about Shodan. It's clearly my favorite, but I did start on KSM 66 and I would alternate between these two. These were my main choices.
Out of curiosity, what solvent is sensoril extracted with?
Alcohol, ethanol, and water. It's a dual extract.
Okay.
Uh,
And then Shodan?
Same thing,
Okay.
ethanol and water. And maybe they're using some special techniques there too. I'm not sure about that, but for example, our Tanga Ali with the 10% uricomanone, there's also some chromatographic separation happening there during the extraction step, which
Mhm.
basically is like the HPLC, UPLC stuff we talk about, but kind of in reverse. Or,
Yeah,
well, yeah, you can
kind of.
explain that better than I can.
We're just kind of focusing the extraction on a specific region or like class of compounds. So it's kind of focusing more on, one class of compounds or one specific compound than the entire extraction itself. And I think that's something special about our company when we develop products is we don't just say, oh, we want to sell this product, we're going to buy it and we're going to sell it. We really go deep into the chemistry and the Uricomex that you guys talked about recently. That's one of the best examples of, we blended so many different types of extractions to make sure we're not just optimizing the single known bioactive, we're also optimizing all of the other peaks that we're seeing and all of the other compounds we're seeing because plants are complex and there's never just one compound that's responsible for an effect. And sometimes you just want that one compound, but sometimes you want the whole slurry of everything so that you can get a very specific outcome. So that's, I think, one of the reasons we offer all four of these products is so that you can kind of pick and choose what you're looking for. But it does make it more complicated because if you're standardizing to a specific compound or a class of compounds, and then your plant had more sunlight and it had 5% more of that compound, then you have to go back and, add more of something else and kind of figure out how to keep that standardization there
Yeah. And I think they also know what they're doing. Like they might make different extracts and then blend them.
and blend
Just
them together.
yeah,
Yeah.
just like a winemaker or a whiskey maker isn't going to put all of their eggs in one barrel. They have multiple ones, and then at the end they blend it all together to make the finished product. And that's how a lot of extracts are being done too. I assume like, oh, maybe the withanolite levels are really high. Let's just put a little bit of raw ashwagandha root in there to dilute it all again, but we keep more ashwagandha bioactives in there. There's a lot of
Mhm.
different techniques that you can do there. Spray drying it back onto itself, or I've done this a few times too with some extracts that I made at home. You can just kind of use whatever plant you extracted. You can use that plant material again, the extracted material, to basically use it as an excipient to dry it onto, or you can grab some fresh material. So, for example, with the ashwagandha, I could extract ashwagandha, and then when I wanted to dry it into a powder, it might be handy to have some cellulose and some starches in there to properly dry it down. I could take some raw ashwagandha root, grind it up, mix the ethanol extract with the dried roots, and then just put it in a dehydrator, and then it will become a nice powder again. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of techniques, and you can steer it. And of course, this is oftentimes proprietary, so we don't know exactly what they're doing, but they have really good control of their processes for the most part. But we'll get to that in a sec. These ones, KSM 66 and Sensoril, we don't have withanolide percentages on them, and that's a very controversial topic. We will touch on that in a second. But before we do that, let's also have a look at our generic one. So that is this one, our generic ashwagandha. What we wanted to achieve with this one was just a high percentage of withanolides. which I guess I can say now, KSM66, it should contain 5% with analytes. We've never found 5% with analytes. Sensoril should have contained 12% with analytes. We never found anywhere near 12% with analytes. And actually, now Kerry, the people who also make butter, they have bought the company that makes Sensoril, and they have actually changed their standardization to 1% with analytes now. So significantly lower. When we found that out, we wanted something that actually had a high amount of withanalytes. And this was before we had Shodan. I think maybe if we had Shodan first, we would have never made this product. But this one was in the interim. And it used to contain 12% with analytes, but at a certain point, we weren't able to consistently hit 12%, so we lowered our standardization to 9%, but it is oftentimes a little bit higher. The one I have in my hand, actually, I calculated it from the COA. You can all see the COA, by the way, on the websites, on the product pages. I calculated that this one contains 11.7% with analytes, so quite a lot above the 9% standardization. But at least when we say 9%, it will always be 9%, and you'll probably get a nice little bonus.
Mhm.
This one, though, is really interesting. It has higher withoferrin A levels. It's a water ethanol extract. It has high withanalytes. It uses the roots. It uses the leaves. And I've seen some people on our Reddit say this is the only one that works for them. That's also why we've kept it around. And it's really popular. This is one I honestly really don't have that much experience with. I have a bottle now, so I'm curious to try this one out a little bit more, maybe a bit longer term if I have some periods of stress. But this is really a favorite one amongst our customers, and
Do you get any specific or like trends in the perceptible benefits that you read on Reddit, like from people's reviews?
sometimes it's a little bit hard to know. So the reports I read for this one said, none of the ashwagandhas work well for me. This one just clicks. Um, I don't know exactly what they mean,
Okay.
but there is a demand for it. I think the overall character of this one is really down the middle. It has some characteristics of Shodan, it has some characteristics of KSM 66, it has some characteristics of Sensoril. If you're probably kind of lost on which ashwagandha to go for, this is probably a good starting point because you get a lot of with analytes for the lowest cost, I believe. It's something that really works well. People always ask for it when it's out of stock. They ask, when is it coming back? So it's a popular one. It's not that specialized, I guess. It's kind of an all-round ashwagandha. I think, a good one to start with if you don't want to go a little bit more specialized, like with Shodan or KSM 66 or Sensoril. Although I would say maybe the two options that are the least specialized are KSM 66, which I think is a really good introduction to ashwagandha because it most closely mimics how it's traditionally used. And then this one, if you want to go a little bit less traditional, but want to have kind of a full spectrum of effects and don't necessarily want to have all of those sleep promoting properties of Sensoril or the more uplifting qualities of Shodan, which I think I can start feeling now. I feel a little bit more relaxed, but I also have a little bit of energy. And I think that's really what makes ashwagandha unique, is that yeah, it's a bit invigorating. I do think you were mentioning earlier that it doesn't, when you first tried it for powerlifting, it didn't seem to have a whole lot of effects. Maybe that could have also been because of the ashwagandha extract that you were taking. I'd be
Mhm.
curious what you think of something like Shodan, because there is some human clinical data showing that in men, Shodan can increase testosterone levels, and in women, it can enhance endurance and I think strength a little bit as well. So there's definitely some appeal there for athleticism. And of course, cortisol is a catabolic hormone, so it's not necessarily conducive to muscle growth. So there's always this idea of maybe after a workout when cortisol levels can rise because of the physical exertion, taking something that knocks down cortisol can be beneficial for recovery and muscle growth. So you see it actually in a lot of post-workout products now, and you see it in a lot of bodybuilding supplements. So it is something that's quite popular at the moment for those purposes.
I
Um,
actually just went to a big like outdoor yoga class, and there was a vendor selling a recovery. I think they had an energy drink and a recovery drink. I had to stop myself from asking too many questions because I know too much. And
Yeah.
yes, but they were selling, they had ashwagandha in both of them as like the key ingredient was KSM 66. And yeah, so it was in the energy drink for like pre-workout, but then also the recovery drink. So I thought that was interesting to have the same main ingredient in both of those very different products.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And also from like a pre-workout standpoint, there's usually quite a lot of stimulants in there. Not everyone can handle those
Mhm.
as well. If you put a little bit of ashwagandha or L-theanine or lemon balm, something that calms the effects, then you can get away with a little bit of extra stimulation without feeling jittery. So
Mhm.
that's another interesting use for ashwagandha. If you have a stack that has some stimulating components in it and you want to smooth that out a little bit, then it's actually a really good idea to add something like Shodan or KSM 66 in to smooth it out, but also add like a little bit of its own energy, which is a really pleasant effect. And I was mentioning, or maybe I haven't said this yet, I think we were talking before we started recording, that ashwagandha was also one of the first supplements I was taking together with Alcar. And the Alcar I added in because it has a slightly stimulating effect and it can balance out some of the potential lethargy, potential demotivating effects of ashwagandha. So from a standalone perspective, which I think is how we always approach these podcasts, not everyone is taking big stacks. You just want to take one ashwagandha product, and how does ashwagandha feel on its own? But it's also a really good one to play around with in a stack, in a blend. If you want to temper a stimulant, take some of this. If you have a little bit more stress in your life than you want, and you need this and another relaxing supplement, which I've done that in the past too. I've stacked Shodan and our 24% Bacchus Bacopa together. If I would take that right now, I'd fall asleep. But during like high stress periods, it's great. It keeps me functional. It keeps me from freaking out. It's a little bit warm, so our camera overheated again. We took a little 10-minute break, which means now the ashwagandha has had plenty of time to kick in. I can
Hmm.
definitely feel it now, but I would like to hear from both of you. What are you feeling?
Ellie, you go first. I'm curious.
I would definitely say the strongest thing I'm feeling is like an uplifted mood. It's 11:15 in the morning for me, which is, kind of when my little midday slump starts to hit. I'm a really early riser, and I'm not feeling that at all right now. I feel um, not like I had caffeine, but I feel like my mood is very uplifted and I feel kind of ready to continue having a conversation. Whereas typically at this time, I would be ready to kind of retreat a little bit and do some more um, like solo task. So I think maybe it's easing, maybe not like social anxiety, but easing kind of the struggles I typically have at this specific time of day with holding a regular conversation, which is a very specific effect, but that's
Yeah.
just kind of how I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah.
That's great. Hey, a special guest just joined us. Hey, Paul.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
How
How
are
are you?
you?
Good. Running
Welcome to the
around like
podcast.
crazy. Just jumped off a board meeting and figured I'd jump on.
Nice. That's
Awesome.
awesome. So now that we have you here, I think we're going to transition into talking about the analytical chemistry, and it might be interesting to start with Shodan first because we've had a little bit of controversy there recently. We developed a Shodan method, which we're going to get into a little bit later on how exactly that works. But we get higher levels of with analytes with that method because we can see more with analytes with that method.
Right.
Consumer labs recently tested our Shodan ashwagandha, which we claim has minimum 35% with analytes, and they did not find that because they're not using the Shodan method, so they're not seeing as many of the with analytes. So we've had some issues there with them, and they don't really want to work together with us to figure out what's going on and maybe try out the Shodan method. So maybe it's interesting to start there because Paul really knows the ins and outs of that.
Yeah, that's to put it lightly.
Yeah.
So to set the stage, Consumer Lab doesn't actually test anything. They're not a lab.
Okay.
Their name is Consumer Lab, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are treating Consumer Lab as this consumer protection nonprofit, which isn't exactly true. They're a for-profit company that makes money by having brands pay them and having consumers pay them to see the results. So there's a little bit of maybe conflict of interest there, which is, in contrast to what we're trying to do with the Future Nutra Foundation, where it's a traditional nonprofit with people on the board from all over the industry, including competitors of ours, just people that want to see good science done right. Where Consumer Lab, they've been around for a while, but we've had a lot of issues with the way Consumer Lab does things for a while. Specifically on the ashwagandha testing, they're falling back on the fact that they're using the USP monograph. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is the USP monographs are usually slow. They're over 100-year-old organization that moves very slowly based on the people that want to donate their time to it and the available science, methods, equipment at the time that they put out a request for a method. So the ashwagandha method, when that was made, many people don't realize that you're only looking at 8 with analytes. Now, ashwagandha has over 40 with analytes. And so if you're only looking at 8 of them and there's 40 of them, you're missing out on a lot of the big picture. The reasoning for that, we've kind of gone into the documents on the USP methodology. And I think the issue there was just the participation from labs and other people in the industry for that method maybe wasn't as comprehensive as it should have been. So
It's also a lot of methods are developed for these organizations like AOAC and USP who set a lot of testing standards, kind of regulate the testing industry using available analytical standards. So they're testing compounds that have analytical standards available, whereas using science and using different methods, you can expand a method beyond what standards exist. But for organizations like USP and AOAC, they'll only test methods where standards exist. And that's a big limitation.
yeah, I mean, that's a big limitation of everything we do. That's why, Arinimax took us a long time. All of these different novel standardizations take time just because of lack of access to the standards themselves. And you kind of have to set a bar somewhere. If there's no method for testing a specific product, it's better to get a good enough method than have no method at all. My big issue is once there is a USP method or an AOAC method, the urgency for people working on improving that method goes way down because now there's a USP method, it's compendial, and the time and effort and money that it takes to go and expand on that, there's just lower hanging fruit, other methods that don't exist. So really the crux of it is the USP monograph. And usually they're referred to as monographs because it's a bigger packet for what should be tested for and approved for a specific plant or mushroom. The USP monograph it is actually different than the AOAC monograph. I think a lot of people don't realize that too. There is an AOAC method for testing ashwagandha, and it differs from the USP. So when we were approached, actually, it was one of our customers reached out to us and said, hey, there's this company called Arjuna out of India, and they've developed a new ashwagandha that is the highest standardization in the world. They said, hey, can you reach out to them and see? And this was years and years back. So we reached out to them, and naturally, I am skeptical over everything.
Yep.
If anybody knows my interactions online, I probably venture into the realm of cynical. I just don't believe anyone without data. So when we approached Arjuna, we said, okay, we'd love to work on this with you, but we're not going to bring it out unless you have full open sharing of science and the data with us so that we can validate these methods and do this testing in our lab. And to Arjuna's credit, they were super easy to work with. They're like, yeah, we love that. So we spent the better part of a year working with Arjuna to make these methods, validate them, and go through the science to ensure that if we're going to make a claim of 35% with analytes, that we've tested it and we believe it and we have validation data to back it up. So that's kind of how the Shodan method came into being. Now, since then, we've expanded on that method. So the original Shodan method is a HPLC method. We've since migrated to UPLC, so we have more control, we use less solvents, we have better separation. And in doing so, we've kind of expanded on what we're looking at and the validation that we've done. So now technically there's four separate methods. So there's the USP, there's the AOAC, there's the original Shodan, and then there's the expanded Shodan.
Okay.
And the chemistry itself is all really very similar. The Shodan method was built off of the USP method. It's just looking at more with analytes than the USP method does.
So
And
how
if you
many
look at
with analytes are we looking at with the Shoda method?
so we're looking at about, I believe, 21.
It's 21 with analyte glycosides. So that's like with anasides is the more common name for that. So that's the typical with analyte base structure plus a sugar group on it. So it's looking at 21 of those, plus the expanded version includes the 8 USP with analytes and with analyte glycosides. So the original Shodan method doesn't include the USP compounds, but then we have combined the two methods to look at. So that makes it 29 compounds.
Very comprehensive.
Yes.
And what's interesting is the USP method actually looks at 10, but you
Okay.
only quantify 8 of them. And I never really got an answer as to why. Why in the method does it say, all right, these two peaks are these with analytes, but don't calculate them for the total with analyte content? And if you read the full USP data packet for when they were doing this method, it's kind of opaque. You don't get a lot of clarification as to why they decided what they decided on. So I think the takeaway from this is, and it's not just for ashwagandha, it's for any plant, any mushroom. The available methods out there are looking at a subset of things. You're never looking at all of the bioactives in a plant or a mushroom. So we actually came up with a term for this, which didn't exist prior to this. So when you have a method, and let's say you're talking about bacopa, and you're saying it's a 50% bacopicide extract, you have to define what you mean by bacopicides. And as far as we could find, there was no term for that. So we created an acronym for it called STAG, STAG, Standardized Target Analyte Grouping, which means, okay, when you say with analytes, when you say bacopicides, when you say hericenones, hericines, what do you mean by that? What are you including in that standardized target analyte grouping so that you can define it, and if another lab comes along and wants to verify, they know what they're supposed to be integrating and looking at.
Mhm. That makes a lot of sense.
I think another important thing to note between the USP method and our expanded Shodan method is the USP method is very clear that it's for roots only. And when we're testing any of our other products that aren't KSM 66, that's root and leaves. And so that USP method is no longer applicable. So that means if you're going to be using it in the lab, you have to do additional validation to confirm it will work on leaves. And it's really hard to source validated leaf only material to make sure that method works on leaves. And so the expanded Shodan method is more applicable for a wider variety of products that is more than just roots. And it's also more than just roots and leaf combination. That's for root powder. When you're looking at like an actual supplement, a lot of times it's more than just the root powder. It could be blended with other plants, and any other kinds of excipients can cause interference in that USP method because it wasn't validated for that. So while it is a valid method, it's not the most applicable to a wide range of products. And that's where that consumer lab data was misleading, is because it, one, wasn't testing our STAG, and two, wasn't using a method that was applicable for a lot of the products that they were testing. And that's, you wouldn't know that unless you looked at the method itself.
Right.
Yeah,
It
we
would
And
be almost impossible for your average person to understand or even realize is important to look at.
Right.
when they have to pay to see those results too. Like
yeah.
the average consumer can't see these consumer lab ashwagandha results unless they paid consumer lab. And then consumers hear, oh, Nootropics Depot failed for their label claims, and they don't get any context. When you look at the actual data, even with the USP methods limitations, we had the highest amount of withanalydes.
Mhm.
Now, I think it was 24.5. I'd have to look up the numbers again, but we were half a milligram off of the next one that tied essentially for
Mhm.
Okay.
most with analytes of any product on the market. And I think a really interesting thing is we went out and bought all of those products that were in the consumer lab testing and reran them through the lab and did not find what they found, even using the USP stag.
Yeah.
And I think Ellie, you actually have a little graph prepared for that, or a table showing those results. Or we could have a quick look at them and see what consumer labs found and then what we found using our method and the USP method.
Yes. Let me pull that up.
And when we say our method, we've kind of taken the USP method, the AOAC method, the Shodan method, and now made a comprehensive method that includes all of the with analytes that we know about and can measure.
Okay.
And maybe a little bit of explanation for with analyte, what is a with analyte, what is a with aniside, because I think that was one of the arguments that was made as well when our lawyers went back and forth with Consumer Lab. They were trying to make it seem like the withanolide glycosides or withanosides aren't withanolides. But the USP method itself looks at multiple withanosides, withanolide glycosides. So the definition of what is a withanolide includes the aglycones, which are the ones without the sugar groups, and the glycosides.
Okay. So yeah.
And when we look at the results, we don't have to go into too many details about the actual numbers here. We can see the label claim from the companies. This is the different companies that were tested by consumer labs, the consumer lab results, and then our results. And this was our results using the Shodan method, so the expanded method. And we're seeing in some cases, we're actually testing a lot less than consumer lab tested.
Huh.
In some cases, we're testing a lot more, um, like in this case or in this case.
Which isn't unusual. We saw the same thing with our Tongat testing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And variation in lab testing is very normal. Typically, you'd want to do a lot of replicates, get some statistics, test different lots, different batches. Variation is normal, but this amount of variation, like from 11.5 to 23 milligrams, pretty significant.
Yeah.
And
To be clear, we're not testing the exact same samples that Consumer Lab
right.
tested. We just went out and bought what was available at the time.
Mm.
So some of this could be maybe the lab that Consumer Lab used was wrong. Some of it could be the batch we got is just different than the batch they got. And
Mhm.
I think that's the big problem in the supplement industry is consistency, where for 12 years now, you buy a product from us and we've standardized to X, at the 4 year mark and the 6 year mark and the 8 year mark and the 10 year mark, it's going to always be that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Consistency is key when you're taking supplements so you know what you're getting every time, year to year, month to month.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with this testing, we were able to see that in some cases the consumer lab report was correct. It did or did not meet label claim when we did the same testing. And in some cases, they tested high enough to say that it did meet label claim when our testing showed it didn't, or that it didn't meet label claim even though it did. So this could mean they need to use a different testing lab. The different methods have different results, but ultimately, Consumer Lab isn't disclosing what method they're using other than it's the USP, where they're testing, and what statistics went into this. And without disclosing that information, we can't really draw big conclusions, but they did anyways.
Hmm.
What was interesting, I think the most interesting for me is Herb Farm was the one that we were essentially tied with for most with analytes. Consumer Lab said we had 23.5 milligrams with analytes per serving, and they had 24. So we just happened to be half a milligram less to not be, at the top. When we tested Herb Farm, we found zero point zero 0.02 milligrams.
Wow.
So Consumer Lab said they found 24 milligrams. We found zero point zero 0.02. Again, not the same batch, but
But
The fact that
the
it's
numbers
even
wrong.
coming up, yeah, that's pretty
Is this
shocking.
company changing their supply chain so much that one will have a ton with analytes and the other one will have almost none?
that's concerning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. And think about the consumers. The consumers, let's say they're paying Consumer Lab to see these results. They're going to go, oh, wow, Herb Farm was the best. I'm going to go buy Herb Farm. And then they go buy Herb Farm like we did, and it's zero point zero 0.02 milligrams with analytes.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think
Mhm.
that's a big problem with Consumer Lab, LabDoor, these for-profit companies that are trying to, I don't want to say masquerade, but make it seem like to consumers that the information that they're putting out can be used to make purchasing decisions. Because Consumer Lab isn't doing proper testing, in our opinions,
Mhm.
for the conclusions that they're making. And they're not testing enough to know whether this result is a fluke or if it's consistent.
Mhm.
So consumers make decisions off these results, and then they get misled and they buy products that are actually bad.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And there really shouldn't be that much variation either.
No.
Right.
Like you're saying,
And
it can be a few milligrams off, but not going from 24 to 0.02. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And we spend so much time, effort, money, blood, sweat, tears to make sure that if we make a claim on our bottle, it's that every time. And we
Mhm.
know what it takes to do that, how complex it is, how much of a headache it is. And we know other brands aren't doing it because just people aren't holding them accountable, and the standards in this industry aren't high enough to where consumers are demanding it. So it's extra frustrating for us because we hold things to pharma level, and we go through so much effort to ensure that when we say a specific number on our label, every customer gets that every time, including padding up for machine tolerances.
Mhm.
We account for the encapsulation machine. Yeah, there's going to be a range. It's never going to put exactly 100 milligrams of something in there. There's going to be a range. So we always pad for the worst case scenario so that every single customer, every single time gets exactly what we say.
And before you joined, we were talking about our previously 12% generic ashwagandha and now 9%. And we're also being really conservative with the standardizations. Like if it's not consistently hitting 12%, we're not going to say it's minimum 12%. We're going to pull it down
Right.
so that you always know you're getting something and you're probably getting a little extra, which I don't think anyone should be mad about getting some extra
No.
bioactives.
Well, same thing with the Colonia Cava, right? It's
Yeah.
a 0.5% standardization, but our most recent batch was like zero point 0.9.
Wow.
Um, and again, it's not an extract, it's just a naturally occurring plant, so it's going to range. But we always set our specs very conservatively so that no customer is ever shorted.
Yeah. And if you want to know exactly what's in your product, now we have all of the COAs on the website. So you just grab your bottle, you look at the lot number, you match it with the lot number that's on the product page, you look it up, and then you can see exactly how much diethyl or exactly how many wethanolytes you're getting, which
Right.
is usually more than our standardization, and sometimes by quite a bit.
Well, and I actually just responded to a customer yesterday. Somebody was a bit confused because they were going on our site looking through the COAs, and they said, "Hey, I'm clicking on multiple COAs and it's the same numbers on different lots. How can
Mm.
that be? How can it be the exact same numbers?" So I think it is good to explain our process a little bit, and I won't go into super big detail, but because we control the process more. We're very vertically integrated. We have 90 employees here, 80,000 square foot. I don't trust anyone anymore unless I can personally oversee it. That's kind of a theme across everything we do. I don't believe anyone unless I can see it with my own eyes. So because we control the process a lot more, we don't have to make massive runs of bottles. We
Mhm.
can do just-in-time inventory, meaning we make the bottles in the sizes that we need based on the demand in real time. Let's say we get a batch of Shodan in, and let's say it's 200 kilos.
Mhm.
Most of the time, we're not allocating that 200 kilos to a specific batch of capsules. We're putting it into inventory. It comes into quarantine first, gets sampled by our QA/QC team. Samples go to the lab. If it gets approved, it gets moved out of quarantine and then put into raw material storage. And at some point, we'll do a video where we can walk around and show you that process, kind of a day in the life of the supplement. But once it's in raw material storage, then our production team, based on demand, decides, okay, what are we going to do with it? And maybe 100 kilos of that, they decide we're going to put into Sheridan capsules. So then that gets staged, QA/QC checks, signs off on it. Then it gets put into capsules. And then in process gets tested. The whole capsule run gets done. Then the lab tests it again to make sure that the run was done properly and it all meets our specs. And then those capsules get put into raw material storage. So we have a bunch of powders in raw material storage, and we have a bunch of finished capsules in raw material storage. We don't immediately put them into bottles because we don't know, are the 60 counts going to sell more? Are the 120 counts going to sell more? Are we going to add a new size? So we keep these capsules in raw material storage, and then production makes the different lots of bottles based on what we need.
Mhm.
That's why those capsules can be in a bunch of different lots, and the numbers all be the same because it's the same capsules, right?
That makes
But we create a new lot COA for every finished lot. That way, when you're looking at your bottle and you see the lot number, you can match it up. And if you look at our COAs, a capsule COA, you're going to see three different codes on there. You're going to see a lot number for the finished bottles. You're going to see a batch number for the capsules. And then you're going to see a batch number of the raw material. So you have full traceability into here are the bottles themselves finished. Let's say it's 120 count. Here are the capsules that went into those bottles. And then here is the raw powder that went into those capsules. And that level of traceability, as far as I know, nobody else in the supplement industry has.
No. I mean, most people aren't even testing every batch. So,
Right.
yeah.
yeah.
Right. We're testing same batch multiple times throughout the process.
Yeah. So really can't go wrong with that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that just kind of is an illustration on how much effort we put into ensuring that our products are perfect every single time. So I know personally, I get very upset when things like this consumer lab thing happen because it makes it seem like our products don't have what we claim
Mhm.
when we're going so far above and beyond anyone else in this industry. It's insane.
Yeah.
And we know that these other brands aren't doing anything.
No, they definitely don't have their in-house labs and yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's been really
So,
interesting seeing how much we've been able to advance the science on things, and I don't think everyone understands yet that we're really at the forefront of advancing the space. Like our paper that's going to come out soon about testing for the hericenones and hericines. It's will be really, yeah, that's groundbreaking stuff. No one's been able to
mhm.
do that yet.
I
And
think one of
also, oh, what were you gonna say,
I
Ellie?
was gonna say one of our biggest goals in the next year going forward, but starting now, is to start publishing more and more. We have so much science on the back burner that we've been working on for years, and now hopefully we can start actually publishing it and getting it out for the world to use to help other brands and other people and consumers make more informed choices. So we love science. We love helping people do research. We love working with other companies like Arjuna to make the best methods we can, but we want to share it so that people can make informed decisions and kind of help put the pressure on other companies to do the same.
And
Absolutely.
that's been kind of a legacy stance from before. For the longest time, we kind of kept to ourselves. We did our own thing. We developed products. We did our own science, but we very much were insular and just kind of put our heads down and got to work.
Mhm.
Where in the last couple years, I kind of made the executive decision, all right, if we're going to make any meaningful, lasting change in this industry, we have to work with other people. We have to partner with other brands. We have to partner with industry organizations. We have to work with other labs, which we've always worked with other labs, but in a more collaborative sense to try and lead by example and do novel methods and publish them for free, not patent them, not keep them behind, a wall like some of these other entities in the space do, but really lead by example and show here is how we make the industry better. And here's how we educate consumers to care. Because in the end, that's going to be the catalyst that drives the change. None of these brands are going to make any changes unless consumers demand it. And consumers aren't going to demand it unless they understand it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what you and Ellie just said was exactly what I was going to basically say in much less intelligent words, but that's basically if you have the science and you have the research, you need to share it with people because if they're not seeing it, it's not important to them. Um,
And if you can't show it, you're probably not doing it, which
yeah.
a lot
And
of
you need to
brands
pressure
say they're
test it.
doing it. Yeah,
It has to be pressure tested, right? If you believe in your data and you believe in your science, you should be open to scrutiny.
yeah,
And scrutiny is good. Peer review is
yeah,
good. Sometimes you miss things. Sometimes you put out information that you think is comprehensive, and then somebody goes, "Wait, did you think of this?" And I'm like, "No." That's how the scientific process works. And I think a lot of people misunderstand the scientific process a lot too. It's not science has all the answers right away.
mhm,
Science is always a process of here is the conclusion we can make based on the available data at the time. But new data comes out in the future, you should be able to change your conclusions and not go, well, I guess science doesn't know what it's talking about. Like, no, that's quintessential part of what science is. It changes.
yep. Constantly, and you got to keep on top of it and keep innovating, and that's something that we're constantly doing.
And I think that's why the USP method is an issue because it hasn't changed. It hasn't grown with the market. And if you look, Ellie mentioned it's for root only. There was some discussion on the panel with USP, if you download it, where they actually changed the name of the method to make it very clear this is only for roots. If
Okay.
there are other parts of the ashwagandha plant in it, it has not been validated for this. And Shodan is a whole plant ashwagandha extract. So using the USP method to determine whether Shodan meets its spec or not is just improper.
Yeah. So let's also pull up some testing data, I guess, that we have, because we haven't really looked at the chromatogram yet. Maybe we can kind of look a little bit through there and see just
Yeah.
visually, do they look any different? Which they definitely do.
And we're looking now back at the four ashwagandha products that Nootropics Depot carries.
Yeah. So quick reminder, that's Sensoril, the one that's a little bit better for sleep. The KSM 66, which is KSM 66, which is the one that most closely mimics traditional use of ashwagandha, only roots, milk extract, very full spectrum. And then our own generic ashwagandha with 9% with analytes. And like I was saying earlier, this batch has like 11.7%, so quite a bit higher. Really good value for money and kind of middle of the road. And then we have our Shodan, which has very high with analytes. And by the way, Paul, we all took Shodan, so we're all
Okay.
feeling the effects at
So did
this
I.
point. It's
Yeah.
oh, nice.
Thanks. I was gonna
I
ask
take it
you.
every day.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
awesome.
great. Yeah, it's a really nice one. I think, yeah, all of us are kind of taking ashwagandha quite regularly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're pushing the science, there's a lot of stress too. You
Yeah.
need you need to keep that under control with something like
Yeah.
ashwagandha.
I take a few supplements.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Well,
take a
so
lot of supplements, but Paul definitely has
Paul's
his
a
own
new level.
too.
Okay, I'm gonna share first the generic ashwagandha, which is the
Okay.
9%, and then we'll look at Shodan.
Okay.
So I have a chromatogram pulled up of our Shodan extract right now. But first, let's talk about the 9%. So the 9% is our generic ashwagandha. It's not a branded product. And we can see all of these different peaks correlate to a different withanolide or withanolide glycoside. And clearly, there's more than the 8 that USP is measuring.
Yeah.
The ones that have an actual name with them are ones that we have analytical standards for. So we are very confident that those are the correct peaks. Everything else we measure with our Shodan method, but they don't have analytical standards. So the way that the Shodan method was developed was the withanolide glycosides are the typical withanolide structure with a sugar group added on. So you can do a hydrolysis step, which cleaves off that sugar group. So when you remove the sugar group, the molecule is different, it weighs less, and it shows up in a different spot on the chromatogram. So if this is withanoside 5, if that sugar group was cleaved, this peak would shift farther down.
Okay.
So the Shodan method, which this is our Shodan product, was able to measure those and confirm that they were withanolide glycosides by cleaving off that sugar group, seeing if a shift happened. If a shift didn't happen to that peak, then it wasn't a glycoside. And if the shift did happen, they were able to measure the size of the peaks that were shifted to. So there's not 21 different of the base structures. So there's maybe 5 base structures, all with different sugar groups attached. So they were able to do NMR on those peaks that increased in size to confirm that it was an actual withanolide base structure. So when the hydrolysis happened, if that sugar group was removed, they confirmed that the base structure that was left was indeed a withanolide and that it was a withanolide glycoside. And they did that for all 21 peaks to confirm that those 21 peaks are withanolide glycosides and that they should be measured as active compounds in this method. So that allowed the method developers and now us when we use this method to say, hey, these 21 peaks all show up because they have similar chemical structures. They have a similar fluorescence to the withanolides that we're measuring. And then they were able to confirm that they are withanolide glycosides and extend the method and what we're measuring. And that's kind of how the Shodan method was developed. So when we're comparing compounds or when we're comparing products using the Shodan method, we're able to see how many withanolide glycosides are in all of these products. We're not only using the Shodan method on the Shodan product to say it has more withanolide glycosides. We're testing all of the products with the same measurements and still seeing that Shodan has the most withanolide glycosides.
And it can get a little confusing too because the Shodan specification, the Shodan stag, is only looking at glycosides. I think a lot of people don't realize that too. The USP method is measuring 8 mixture of aglycones and glycosides. Shodan is only standardized to the glycosides. There are aglycones in there, but it's not standardized to them. So we don't make a claim on it. It's 35% with analyte glycosides. And generally we see what, like 6% aglycones in there as well. But because it's not standardized to it, we don't make that claim. So when you're looking at results, which peaks are integrated is going to differ based on whether you're using the USP, the AOAC, the Shodan, or our expanded method. And with our expanded method, what we've done is really taken all of them and kind of merged them and say, what's the most comprehensive picture of the withanolide glycosides and aglycones in a product?
That's great. Yeah. And so if we see here, we're looking, okay, Shodan, which we just took. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier, and we can compare it with KSM 66 and the 9%. But you see big peaks here, but maybe not as many peaks. So the overall diversity is maybe a little bit lower, but you get bigger amounts of some of them. And I
Right.
think that gives a really unique effect to Shodan compared to something more full spectrum. So we can kind of focus in on certain things or we can broaden things. And I think that makes extraction a real art where you can kind of pick and choose things and really focus. For example, with Tongat, we can focus on urocominone, but we can also focus on all of the other compounds around urocominone, and that gives different characters of effects. And that's, of course, why we have four different ashwagandha extracts, because they all capture something different from the plant.
Mhm.
And it's not just the extraction methodology either. There's different cultivars, different growing regions, different other processing techniques that shift it.
Yeah.
So just like lion's mane, growing Hericium in the Pacific Northwest of America is
Mhm.
going to be different than in Europe or in China. So the type of extraction you do is only going to extract what you can get out of the raw material that you're using, and that range is a lot. So I think with Shodan too, they have a very unique cultivar.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It seems to be, and from what I feel, it definitely feels different. We were saying earlier, I got my hands on a bag of some ashwagandha root and I made my own extract, and that feels really different compared to KSM 66. So, and if you make a tea out of the roots, it feels different. So, based on where it's coming from, the growing climate, the extraction, the dosages, like it all really you get so many different expressions from the same plant. And I think that's why a lot of us are so passionate about botanicals, because there's just so many different expressions of one botanical or one mushroom, and that makes it really exciting to work with them.
But if
And
you're
we
not,
did blinded testing in house on the ashwagandhas.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of the people that work for Nootropics Depot take blinded capsules of each ashwagandha and rate them. And it was a really interesting exercise because it was very split.
Yeah.
Some people got stimulated with KSM 66. Some people got calm. Some people loved Sensoril for sleep. Other people liked KSM or Shodan for sleep. It was very pretty much evenly split amongst all the people that we did the blinded testing with. So when people ask us why do you have so many different extracts and products of the same thing, they're not the same thing. Everybody's different. Everybody's brain and body chemistry is different. What works best for one person might be horrible for another person.
Yeah. I was really surprised by that blind testing we did. It's a long time ago now, but it jogged my memory. I was predicting like, oh, Paul Sharp is gonna really like this one, and then he came back and he said, "Nah, that was my least favorite one. I like this
Yeah,
one more." Even though we had taken them knowingly, knowing what they were, but then blinded, we all had different preferences. So that
I was
I found
surprised as well. You sometimes have a little bit of preconceived notions on things, and you think, oh yeah, this one is best for this because of your previous experience, and then you go blinded with a bunch of other people that have never taken it, and they get the opposite effect.
yeah,
So that's why science sometimes is very complex because we are all so different from each other.
yeah,
It would be our lives would be much easier if everybody reacted the exact same to everything. But even when you go into your doctor and they prescribe you a prescription for something, how many times have you gone in and the doctor goes, "Here's a prescription," and it works exactly how it's supposed to the first time, and they don't have to try you on any other drugs? It's constant. They're changing. All right, well, that didn't work. Let's try this. So the same in the supplement world.
yeah, absolutely. And of course that's why we offer so many different ashwagandhas. And I understand that it can become a little bit confusing sometimes for new customers, but see it as like this is a really good thing because you have so much variety to choose from. Maybe if one ashwagandha doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that that's the end of your ashwagandha saga. There's something else for you to try, and you might find something that works really, really well for you, like all of us have with Shodan. I think Shodan's probably become one of our favorites. I think I was just saying earlier, I started on KSM 66, then I had some time with Sensoril, and then once Shodan came, I've never gone back to KSM or Sensoril.
I still like KSM. I do get good effects from it.
Mhm.
Um, if I'm I ran out of Shodan the other day and I had a bottle of KSM, so I switched back to KSM for a little bit. I still like Shodan more. It works better for my body chemistry. But I think Sensoril, KSM, our internal ashwagandha, and Shodan are all good products. It just depends on the type of person. So I don't want to make it seem like we're promoting one and saying the other suck. They all have their own unique fits.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's all personal preference. Just because I like Shodan a lot, and Erica likes Shodan a lot,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that that's going to be the best fit for you. I would say actually, if you're looking for something more calming, Shodan actually isn't necessarily the best option because there's a bit more of an energizing quality to it.
I
Then
take
maybe
it
a better.
midday
Yeah,
every time I take it.
yeah. Which interesting to
And
note for.
you and I usually react pretty similar to most things.
Yeah.
There's only a few instances where we react differently, like Tonga. You like the 2%, I like the 10%,
Yes.
um, which it has its own drawbacks. You know, when you and I are beta testing everything and we react very similar to a lot of things, it can make it difficult to get a objective picture of what all the average consumer is going to react like.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which it's good that we're doing beta testing with a much larger group now, and we see way different responses, which I find really interesting. That, and especially some people from the lab who are really like analyzing what's happening with them, and I like seeing those reports.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people in our lab, they're the type of people that don't react well to a lot of things. So then if they beta test something and they're like, wow, I really feel this, we know, okay, the average consumer is going to feel this strong because they rarely feel anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why our products work so well. I've gotten that question a few times from people like, I've tried all sorts of different ashwagandha extracts, or lion's mane. Like, why does yours work so well? And yeah, the works well because we're trying it on ourselves. We're not just looking at the chemistry. We're not just looking at the research. We're trying it out on ourselves, selecting different standardizations, selecting different extracts, selecting uh, different botanical origins, and just seeing what feels the best for us. And obviously, if it feels good for us, it doesn't mean it feels good for everyone. But the more we expand that group and the more consensus we get within the group, the more convinced we can be that, yeah, this is an effect most people are going to experience with it.
It's also important that you do beta testing with people who aren't necessarily at the same level of informed as others. Like,
Hmm.
for example, when I'm taking these products, sometimes I'm taking something for the very first time on the podcast. So what I'm telling you, my experience is literally from the previous 30 minutes with very little research to back it up and no nowhere near the scientific understanding of you or Ellie or Paul. But when that experience actually echoes similar things that you experience or that you've researched, then we know, okay, we're onto something and it's not just confirmation bias. And I think
Yeah.
that's the case for a lot of other people on the team too, who are working in different departments for the company. They're still trying the products. And it's fascinating when you do find that people do have similar experiences because then you can trust it even more, even as a person who is less or more informed.
Yeah. And
Well,
also,
and that's just anecdotes, right? Like
yeah.
Yeah.
just because you don't feel something doesn't mean it's not working, which is part of the reason why we created the cell culture lab. If you show that certain things are doing certain effects in human cells, you may not be able to consciously feel that. You know, all of these health benefits don't necessarily mean you're going to take it and then immediately feel something.
Yeah. No. Some are acute, some take weeks,
Right.
and some are
And
acute and take weeks.
to your previous point, a lot of what we do these days is because I want access to something. So a lot of our new product development is really driven by me wanting to develop something really cool because I want to take it. So you kind of see that in our new product development. So we are trying to branch out from that a little bit because I don't react well to everything. Maca is one that you react really well to, but I got really screwed up with some raw maca that destroyed my GI tract. So that was why we developed our 5% maca. But so we're coming out with a new maca that is going to be a more traditional maca that hits on those points that I'm not going to take because I know there are people out there that want that. And just because I don't react well to it doesn't mean we shouldn't offer it. But a lot of our new product development is because we're developing it because I really want access to it. So if you're reacting well to a lot of our new products, then you probably have very similar body chemistry to me.
Yeah. I think that's really unique. I don't think there's a lot of supplement companies who are really focused on, hey, I have the opportunity to make something for myself, for my friends and family, and seeing positive experience in yourself and your friends and family is obviously really reinforcing to the mission. And other people get to enjoy that too. And yeah, I that's also part of the reason why on every podcast we take the products to really show you that we take these products. We're not just talking about them. We're experienced with these products. We take them daily, sometimes for years. Like ashwagandha, I've taken for about 10 years. You've taken for about 6 or so.
Hmm.
Paul, you've been taking ashwagandha probably longer than I have.
Yeah,
So,
and I think the reason for that is a lot of companies in this space are really in it to make money.
mhm.
Um, where obviously we need to make money to fund our operations, but we're in it for a much bigger purpose. We want to, expand the lab testing and quality control standards of the industry. We want to expand standardization and understanding of what these plants and mushrooms do in the body. And we're biohackers at heart. We want to take these things for our own health, but also for our own curiosity.
Yeah.
Sometimes we go and we develop things or we try new extracts just to see how they feel. We're very much biohackers at heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that human element of it. Sometimes you see something in a paper and you try it out and you're like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like there's so many papers saying, oh, this thing is so potent on the GABA receptors, you're gonna fall into a 3-day coma if you take this. And we take it and it's
Remember
like,
ferulic acid?
yeah, yeah, that was a strange one.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a weird one.
all the science made it seem like it would be great for sleep. And all in our beta testing, it was in our original sleep support beta stack. Everybody would fall asleep, and then a couple hours later, they would wake up sweating and like couldn't go back to sleep, just horrible. And that's how we discovered, oh, well, ferulic acid does bind to the histamine receptors, so you fall asleep pretty quickly. But then it metabolizes into an adrenergic compound. So then you wake up, can't go back to sleep all night, and you're sweating from activating the adrenergic system. So you sometimes see what a paper says, and then in the real world you take it and it does the opposite, or you find new mechanisms that you wouldn't have if you hadn't tested it on yourself.
Yeah. And it took us a while to figure it out until I think both of us took a higher dose of ferulic acid, and I was like, ah, it's making me feel kind of calm. And then an hour or two later, like, boing, I'm awake. I'm like,
We,
okay.
we ruined multiple nights of Paul Sheard's sleep with it.
Yeah, he was pissed. Yeah. I think that's maybe something people don't realize either. Like when we're in the beta testing phase, it's not always good. And sometimes it's really bad, especially back in the day with alcohol defense. I remember, and Paul Sheard is usually on the receiving end of the worst effects. I gave
Yeah.
him a little shot of alcohol defense, and he took it after a night out and just project vomited everywhere
Oh
because it
no.
wasn't a good formulation. So, well, we abandoned
Well,
that one.
it's one of the strongest ginger extracts in the world, and you do like a liquid shot of it, and it's too much for some people.
Oh no.
So we nixed the liquid shot idea.
Yeah, that was bad. We couldn't make it work. Yeah.
Do you want to look at some other chromatograms?
Yeah, maybe
So we
the
Yeah.
looked at Shodan.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so this was Shodan,
Hmm.
and then this is the 9%. And as we mentioned, the 9% is roots and leaves, and so that's why we're seeing such a big luteferin A peak, because I think Emil, you mentioned we think it is more leaf than roots in this combination. And so a large percentage of that 9% is with the ferrin A, but we're also seeing pretty substantial peaks of withanolide 5. We're seeing withanolide A, which is a pretty prominent, very like well-researched withanolide, as well as withanoside 4. So we're still seeing quite an abundance of the withanosides, the glycosides, with the ferrin A. But overall, the takeaway for me from this compared to Shodan is it's much more complex. It has that really big with the ferrin A peak, but we're seeing a lot more of these smaller peaks throughout the chromatogram too. And that's exactly what we were saying is we expect this to be more complex, less concentrated in the specific glycosides and more complex, more full spectrum effects. And I think that's what we expect to feel too from all of the antidotes we've heard and Emil has talked about even in this podcast is that it's a more well-rounded effect, less of the uplifting mood effects and more balanced.
Yeah, and
What
that's why I was saying it's kind of a midpoint between a lot of like Shodan and then KSM 66 and Sensorial. There's a big gap between them in terms of potency and effects as well. And I think this one, the 9%, really slots in the middle and kind of gives you a taste of both worlds. So it's a good one to start with, probably.
and with the ferrin A has a lot of really good researched effects, but those effects aren't the calming ones.
No.
So this idea that with the ferrin A is bad is just wrong. There are a lot of really good benefits with ferrin A, but those might not be acutely feelable. They're the more underlying health benefits like immune modulation.
And we actually discussed this a little bit earlier in the podcast. I was looking at with the Farron A because with this whole anhedonia thing that gets discussed, I see it maybe a little bit more with KSM 66. That could just be because it's so popular, but it's also missing with the Farron A. So I was looking like, is there something about with the Farron A that maybe protects against that a little bit more? I think all ashwagandhas can have a demotivating effect if you don't have enough stress in your life. But with the Ferrin A seems to enhance dopamine output a little bit, which would be good for motivation, would be good protection against something like anhedonia. And seeing it in really high amounts here and in Shodan, and both Shodan and the 9% have a bit more of that uplifted feeling too. I think there might be something to it, but I can't know for sure.
And that's where maybe our cell culture lab can come in eventually when we have some time.
Yeah,
What is isolated with the ferrin A doing in human cells?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the last chromatogram I have is KSM 66. So this is actually from Now Foods, from their KSM 66. It's the same product, just different company selling it. And we can see no with ferrin A. I mean, we see a little tiny little peak, and that's, it's not elucidated if it's only made in the leaves. There could be some made in the roots, could be just some kind of cross between when they were harvesting for any reason. But we're not seeing that big prominent peak of with the ferrin A that we were seeing in the leaf samples. But then we see a much more balanced across all of these peaks of what the different withanolides and withanolide glycosides are that are in this product.
And this is a finished lot of Now Foods KSM 66.
Right. So this is one we just bought. And they passed their label claim. They claimed 11 milligrams per cap, which is 2.5%. That is what most of the KSM 66 label claims you'll see is 2.5%. But when we used our Shodan method, we actually saw that it was more like 5%. So they've got the content they claim. KSM 66 is a great product. It's going to typically meet those label claims. It just has a different profile and a much lower content than the products that have the leaves because it doesn't have the leaves.
And if you look at the consumer lab results, I don't know if they said Now Foods failed, but they showed a lot less with analytes than this in those results. So you can see Now Foods claims 11. We're finding 23 with the Shodan method. There can be very big differences when you look at a more comprehensive set of the with analytes.
Yeah. Yeah, this does a good job of just showing bioactive diversity here. Yeah, you don't see that many big peaks, but there's a lot of them. And then if you go up in strength, you see bigger peaks and less of them. And that's really the big differences between these. And then also, of course, if you look at something like the 9%, which is really potent compared to Shodan, they look more similar, but the 9% just has a bit more diversity there. So you're going to have some different effects and some different ratios of the with analytes. And it would be really interesting to know exactly what each of these with analytes are doing. And it would be amazing to be able to maybe in isolation take all 41 at some point, but that's really hard. So it's difficult to know what exactly we want. Paul, maybe you remember this. Back in the day, we had one batch that was really high in 12-deoxy with astromonolite, which had a
Yeah,
really unique feeling. And I've never come across any other ashwagandha that had that feeling. We've never seen something with that high of a 12-deoxy with astromonolite level. And I was seeing today, it seems like 12-deoxy with astromonolite binds to the cannabinoid CB1 receptor and to opioid receptors. So
right.
it makes sense that that one was really mood boosting. But
Yeah. Well, and that's the quintessential reason why stag is so crucial. You have to define what you mean by with analyte, or else it can vary so much that you take one extract that's 5% and another extract that's 5%, and they feel totally different.
yeah.
Mhm. I think that's also, this chromatogram is really good at showing the ones that are in the USP method. These are the ones that are labeled. Um, they have standards, but they look kind of arbitrary based on abundance. Like there's not more of with analyte A than this random peak right here. So it's just what's available for standards. It doesn't really have so much to do with what's actually the main bioactive compounds. It's
Yeah.
just what's available.
Which is why we created a reference standard manufacturing part of our lab. And originally we did that, for lion's mane, which Arenimax is a product of that program.
Mhm.
But the same thing for all the other plants that we're working on, and also lion's mane fruiting body.
Yeah.
You have to have reference standards to be able to standardize and quantify accurately. And if those standards don't exist, you have to make them.
Yeah. And in that case, we're even lucky enough that some research exists identifying those compounds and that those might be active. Sometimes they haven't been identified. Like there might be a whole other class of compounds in lion's mane or ashwagandha that are just as important, are maybe getting extracted with the same amount as the with analytes. Like maybe there's some alkaloids in there, which there are, and those could be important. But
Blood
yeah,
ones.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
And on Arenimax's front, it's standardized to adenosine C as well. We just don't make that claim because we don't currently have enough reference standard uh, to do that internally. But a lot of people don't realize that our Arenimax is standardized to adenosine A and adenosine C. And once we have enough reference material to add that to our stag, then we'll make that label claim. But that's kind of an example of we're not going to put it on the label until we're sure we can back it up by valid science.
yeah. Which is a stark contrast to some others in the industry, because I remember 8 years ago, people were already claiming 2% adenosine A and
Which
impossible.
was a dry lab.
Yeah.
It was just completely fake. I think you guys have talked about it before. I've talked about it on Reddit, where the lab that people were sending lion's mane samples to that were giving 4% adenosine, 4% hericinone numbers, was just a completely fake dry lab. And we actually didn't think it was a fake dry lab at first. We thought they were just using shitty chemistry. We thought they were just doing like a UV triterpene method and going, well, if there's triterpenes in there, then it has to be adenosines and hericinones. So what we did is we sent lion's mane samples to them, and we labeled them 1% arenosines, 2%, 5%, and we spiked some of the samples with a cheap triterpene, thinking, okay, well, if they're measuring triterpenes and just assuming they're arenosines, that's what they're gonna come back with. And they came back and they approved all our samples. We had to pay them first, obviously. And, was 1.1%, 2.2%, 5.3%, just a little bit over what we said it should be. Which the interesting thing was, none of those samples were lion's mane. We sent them yeast labeled as lion's mane just to see what would happen. And they all came back, yep, lion's mane with the concentrations that you thought. So, and that's just one of the labs. We found multiple labs doing that. But that's another example why, we started the conversation 12 years ago, 13 years ago about you need to ask for lab testing. You need to ask for COAs. And I'm really proud of how much traction we've gotten there. A lot of consumers ask for that now. The next phase is, okay, now that you're asking for that stuff, it has to be valid. It has to be a real lab, an ISO accredited lab that's doing real chemistry, that's giving you numbers that mean what they say. And that's a harder conversation to have with consumers because it's a lot more complex. And you got to get down into the science, you got to get down into the chemistry. And the average consumer isn't going to understand it. And you really have to convince them that they should care enough to sit and listen to the details. It doesn't mean we don't keep trying, but and we've made good headway there, but that's a much slower kind of process. And as I said before, the industry is going to move forward when the consumers demand it. So it's really crucial to get consumers realizing they need to care about this and asking the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're getting a little bit more there compared to when this all first started.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
It's
mean,
just, it's been 12 years. It's
yeah,
it's been a long, hard journey. I,
yeah,
I would have hoped we could get more traction quicker, but it's just a harder sort of mission.
yeah,
We're fighting against an industry that most players are in just to make money, and they're willing to lie and do all sorts of shady tactics in furtherance of that.
yeah,
Where we have to come in and say, "Hey, no, you're being misled." And I think some of the reason why the messaging hasn't taken on as big of a life of its own as I had hoped is people don't like to feel like they made a bad decision.
yeah,
If they've been buying from a brand that they found on Amazon for a few years, and we come out and say, actually, that's not even Sustanch, or that there's no uricilmenone in that tongue gap.
Mhm.
We're telling them that they made a bad decision. They bought from a brand that they shouldn't have. And human nature just makes it so that people are going to push back on the messenger. That's why shoot the messenger is a thing. So I think we've kind of fallen prey to that a little bit. I think we've experienced shoot the messenger a lot when all we're really trying to do is help inform consumers, educate consumers, and force brands to take things seriously.
yeah. And it also makes it complicated, like we were looking at with the consumer lab data. One of the herb farm that they tested was 24 milligrams, and then the one we tested was 0.02. So maybe there are genuine reviews out there of one of the batches that works amazing, and then the next batch does nothing. And then yeah, that really muddies the waters too.
Well, I'll hint a little bit. I don't know how much I can talk about, but we've been working with a very big lab in the industry that does contaminant testing on Shilajit.
Mm.
And we found some interesting things with adulterated pharmaceuticals in Shilajit. So somebody goes out, buys Shilajit from Amazon and goes, wow, I love this. And then they come buy our Primavie and they're like, I'm not getting the same effect. That could be because there's undisclosed pharmaceutical ingredients in there too.
That's not good. And we've seen that a lot in the bodybuilding world too, where a pre-workout will just contain an unlisted amphetamine, and then athletes get tested and they test positive for an amphetamine. Like I've never used
Right.
an amphetamine in my life, except you've been using it for months in your
Yeah.
pre-workout. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a range of bad with failing results, right? It could just be it has less with analytes than they claim. It could be it's not ashwagandha at all, or it could be there's undisclosed active pharmaceutical ingredients in there,
Yeah.
or all of the above.
Like it's really tricky if you're taking other stuff too, like
Yeah.
drug drug supplement interactions is definitely something I focused a lot on when I was doing my grad school stuff. It's the scariest thing for me, I think, is if you're taking something that's prescribed to you, you take a seemingly harmless plant and there's something that's not disclosed. Like, what kind of person would put that in a product? It's like
Yeah.
the things people would do for money just blows my mind. And I feel really lucky to work for a company that would never do that and would we take testing so seriously that that would never happen, but that's not the reality for most companies. And we just want consumers to be safe and to make safe choices. Even if we're not that choice, we want people to have the option to choose a safe product because you're putting stuff in your body and your body is all you got. And
Yeah.
so we don't want people to damage it. And we just want to be, we want people to make safe decisions and make the best decisions for themselves. And that means disclosing data and asking for data.
And these days, there's some genuinely concerningly dangerous stuff out there, especially at gas stations, like the recent lawsuits with the diamond shrooms gummies. Like you go to a gas station, you buy mushroom gummies, and next thing you know, you're having hallucinogenic effects because some idiot put a bunch of unlisted tryptamines in there, and you just have no clue. If you buy them at a gas station and you eat the whole bag and you're driving on a 4-hour road trip just completely out of it, that's super dangerous.
That's part of the reason I got into the industry in the first place. It was a batch of mislabeled pyritinol.
Mm.
So I'm a moderator on Reddit, and the I forget what. Oh no, I know the brand. I won't mention it, but a brand at the time was selling what they claimed was pyritinol, which is supposed to be two vitamin B6 molecules bonded together by a disulfide bridge. So it's a modified vitamin B6. This person then took a 400 milligram dose of it, and it turns out that this brand was just buying from China, doing no testing, and it was actually Benadryl, diphenhydramine. So he took a 400 milligram dose of diphenhydramine and then started getting delirious and
Mm.
crashed on his bike. And that was kind of the catalyst that made me realize this has to change. Like these brands have to take lab testing and quality control seriously because this is people's health. You
Yeah.
know, people putting this stuff into their body. It's not, you're not selling a trinket or, you know, shoes or something that you still don't want to be scammed. But if you get scammed, it's like, oh, wow, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
This is your health. You're putting it into your body. If there's undisclosed pharmaceutical ingredients or adulterants or it's mislabeled something else, you know, you can get hurt and die.
Mhm.
So the stakes are a lot higher in this industry. And it is very disconcerting that so many actors in this industry just don't care enough to take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. It makes me wonder who some of these people are behind it. I would hope they're so naive they don't know what they're doing. But if you really
That's
know
my
what you're
hope too.
doing,
Is
yeah.
I'm hoping these brands, these like TikTok brands, these influencer brands, they just give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't know what they don't know. They shouldn't be selling products, but I'm really hoping they're not just like putting effort into misleading people.
It's Occam's razor, right? You want to say, wow, it's mostly incompetence. I think it's a mixture. I think a lot of it is willful
Mhm.
ignorance. People know that if they go down these rabbit holes or they lift up these rocks and they find something, they're going to have to do something with it. So people keep the blinders on so that they have plausible deniability and go, well, I didn't know. When I think deep down inside, a lot of these people know they're not holding things to the standard that they should, but there's seemingly no consequences for not doing things right. And
Mhm.
consumers aren't demanding enough that they do it, so they know they can get away with it,
Yeah.
but still have plausible deniability in their own heads to go, well, I didn't know. I didn't know I was poisoning people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with some of that really high heavy metals, like you really just are poisoning people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that story that just came out on the lady that got liver damage from turmeric.
Yeah. That's scary.
Well, a lot of the turmeric coming out of India has a dye in it that
Mhm.
is contaminated with lead, and they're doing
Well,
it so that they can make the turmeric look more orange.
the actual dye, crazily enough, is lead. It's like lead
Right?
oxide. It's
Yeah.
So bad.
And these people know what they're doing. Like they're willingly putting this lead dye into turmeric to mislead people and profit off of them, off of their harming their health.
yeah,
It's foreign to us because we care so much about it, but it's common, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. It's sad, especially because we're taking these things to enhance our health, and then yeah, you end up in the hospital with liver failure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the biggest the biggest thing for me is it shouldn't have to be me coming in and trying to build a company and force change across the whole industry, right? There are players that have been in this industry that have made lots of money for lots of years that should be leading the way on this, but they're not. Industry organizations,
Mhm.
other brands, just people that have been in this industry for a long time and have made a lot of money off of it already should be the ones trying to pull this industry to where it needs to go. And I think that's the biggest disappointment in my head is it always seems like we have to drag it kicking and screaming where we think it needs to go when I feel like there are a bunch of other people that should have done this before I came onto the scene.
Yeah, agreed. And especially for just the longevity of this industry, if we keep having people getting injured, it's all gonna get taken away from us at a certain point. Like we need to
Right.
focus on doing it right, providing safe products.
And it's not just injury too. It's the legitimacy of whether consumers think supplements work.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people out there think that supplements are a scam. And it's not that supplements are a scam, it's that the supplement companies are a scam.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the same thing with regulations. It's not that supplement industry itself is unregulated, it's unenforced, which to a consumer, what's the difference between unregulated and unenforced? If there's a speed limit, but there's never any police out there stopping anyone, there's effectively no speed limit.
Yeah.
Same thing. There are tons of regulations, thousands of regulations in this industry. But if there's no enforcement of those regulations, then are they really laws? Are they really rules?
Yeah.
And that's where the bad actors kind of rise to the top. When you have an industry that doesn't enforce seemingly quintessential things to its operation, like lab testing, quality control, making sure things aren't mislabeled. If nobody is held accountable for doing bad stuff, then the bad actors are going to rise to the top because
Hmm.
they're willing to put people at risk and harm for profit.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's of course something with lab testing and doing things correctly like we do. It takes a lot of money, it cuts into your profit margins. If you don't have any of that, you can put all of that money into marketing, and you see it with a lot of these companies. Big influencers, lots and lots of marketing that costs a lot of money, and that money should be going probably towards lab testing, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard for consumers to see on the outside, but we would make a lot more money doing things the way all these other brands do.
Yeah.
But we're trying to do a bigger mission. We're trying to make much more lasting change. And that's just expensive, time consuming, and difficult. And there's a reason that a lot of other players in the industry don't do it. It's because you don't make nearly as much money.
Yeah.
You have way more stress. It causes way more complexity, which is why I have to take Shodan,
Yeah.
a bunch of other supplements.
I was gonna say, what about our job is stressful? What?
Yeah, and admittedly, it's a creation of my own doing. I've made this piece from nothing, so I have no one to blame but myself. But I'm so passionate about just trying to make this industry better because we've seen consumers, our own family members, ourselves get such good effects from supplements, and then see that the average consumer thinks that everything's a scam and knowing that it's just because of the bad actors is crazy.
Yeah.
The medical community, doctors, there's so many people out there that just think supplements are a scam. And it's because of nothing else other than the bad actors.
Hmm.
So the good actors in this industry should want to come together and push the bad actors out. It'll make everybody rise.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, at one time when I was flying from the Netherlands back to the US, I always got interrogated. That's kind of how it always goes. And this time the guy said, "Okay, what kind of work do you do?" I said, "Oh, I work for in the supplement industry." And he was looking at me really serious. Yeah, but supplements are scams. I thought I was gonna get sent home. Like he was even there. The guy was at the border patrol was convinced supplements were a scam. Yeah.
Well, I was just in the hospital a couple weekends ago. I had some raw oysters that seemed to be tainted, which I think that was the first time I've ever had like Vibrio. Vibrio is the bacteria that can be in raw oysters. It wasn't fun. So, but I went to the hospital, and I always kind of strike up conversations with everyone everywhere I go. And I was talking to the doctor there, and he was asking me what I did, and I mentioned, oh well, I own a supplement company, and that same kind of conversation happened. Oh well, aren't supplements kind of a scam? And I said, well, I explained the whole thing. It's really the bad actors. There's really good supplements. You have to standardize to bioactives. And then I mentioned lion's mane, and his demeanor changed, which was very interesting to me. He said, oh, okay, well, yeah, no, lion's mane shows a lot of promise. I think there's a lot of potential there. So even a doctor that thinks the entire supplement industry is a scam thinks that lion's mane shows promise. So there are, little glimmers of hope here that people go, well, I have seen enough data with this specific supplement to know it's not a scam. So the more we work to kind of change the standards in the industry, and the more we focus on published science and standardization to bioactives, I think the medical community is going to come around more and more towards, okay, some supplements are really good. They just have to be made in the right way.
Yeah. Just
But I
like
thought that was really interesting.
meditation.
Like, he's like, supplements are a scam. Oh, but not lion's mane.
That's
I
funny.
always wonder how people can think botanical supplements are a scam when they are traditional medicine that people have used for thousands of years and have kept entire communities alive and functioning. And they come from like traditional rooted knowledge that humans have used for thousands of years. People weren't just like consuming plants for no reason. Like if they use it for medicine, it worked for a reason. And I don't know how you can just dismiss that without being dumb, honestly, in my opinion. Like
It's ethnocentrism.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's ethnocentrism where we think Western medicine is real, it's scientific. Everyone else are just savages that have been doing useless things for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Carrie, who's on our scientific advisory board, she's an ethnobotanist. She has a lot of really good insights because she flies all over the world and goes to these traditional communities and sees how they've used these plants for hundreds and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And you're right, like, why would a society use a plant or a mushroom for thousands of years if it didn't do anything?
Hmm.
It's crazy.
And I mean, up until like 100 years ago, most medicines were still of natural origin. The fact that we created these synthetic compounds that are really good medicines sometimes, but sometimes worse than their natural inspirations, is just like patenting money, all of this. And we've advanced it, but we
Yeah.
were also doing pretty good with thousands of years of botanical use. And a lot of compounds that we have in the pharmaceutical industry are derived from natural compounds.
And they're often made worse. So
Yeah.
they find a natural compound that has been used traditionally in a specific culture, but you can't patent it because it's a natural compound.
Mhm.
So they make a synthetic modification to it that maybe sometimes makes it better, but sometimes makes it worse, but it's patentable.
Yeah.
They have patent protection on it. They can get it approved as a drug. And that's how a lot of our drugs were discovered and approved as synthetic modifications to natural compounds that they found. not always improving the effects.
No, definitely improving the profit margins.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of profit that the pharmaceutical industry makes is insane.
Yeah.
And with that sort of profit, I'm sure there's plenty of propaganda campaigns to continue to make consumers think that supplements are a scam because it's pretty clear. I think everybody can agree that the pharmaceutical industry is not in this to fix everyone's problems. They're
Yeah.
in it to treat symptoms for the long term. And I talked about it on the radio show with Lance, like testosterone replacement therapy.
Mhm.
They want you on things that you become dependent on
Yeah.
so that you always have to keep taking them. And if it causes side effects that requires another drug that you have to continue to take, great,
Yeah.
even better,
Yeah.
because it's very much an industry.
And that's not all pharmaceuticals,
No.
like take
No.
your medicine, listen to
Yeah.
your doctor for sure. But it's not, there's preventative options as well.
Yeah, I'm not somebody that doesn't take vaccines and doesn't take drugs and doesn't listen to doctors, but you have to put things into the right context. And a lot of times, the doctors are trying to treat your symptoms that you come in with, rather than going back to the root cause. What's causing this symptom? Why don't we address the cause before we try to mask the symptoms? And
Mm.
that's where doctors of obstetrics and naturopaths can come in. And I actually just met one my wife went to. She's really great. She's a full fledged doctor, but she focuses on that holistic medicine where, all right, here's what we're seeing in your blood work, here's what we're seeing in the lab tests. Let's try and figure out what's causing that and see if we can't fix that before we start masking it with pharmaceuticals.
Mhm.
That's great. And oftentimes it's just, oh, your magnesium levels are a little bit off, or this really easy fixes.
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vitamin D is a big one too, especially in Canada and northern climates in the winter.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. When I run out of our vitamin D, I feel terrible. And then when I take it, I'm like, oh, hey, I'm back. Yeah.
Well, you're in the Netherlands now, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
it more.
Yeah. In
Here,
Phoenix, it
absolutely.
wasn't a problem. But here, when the winter hits and it gets dark at like 4 p.m., it's rough.
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I grew up having to take vitamin D living in South Carolina. So
Mm.
I just
Yeah.
always, my mom was sufficient. I knew I was sufficient. And even living in like South Carolina where it's sunny most of the year, I still had to take it. So it could be anything. And you can't know unless you go to the doctor, really. So
Yeah.
Exactly.
well, and that's where some of our newer products like the Infinigreens, we're going to be coming out with an optimized vitamin D and optimized vitamin K. They might not seem as exciting on the surface, especially if you come from the more advanced nootropic supplement side, but you really have to lay a solid foundation, and nutrition is that solid foundation.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting proper nutrition from your diet, then you have to supplement for it. And for some people, it's just hard to eat everything they need and get all the nutrients from their food. And like with me, I intermittent fast, so keeping all the nutrients and all the vitamins up and everything with eating one meal a day is a lot more difficult. So supplementing things like Infinigreens and vitamin D and magnesium really helps so that I know I'm keeping the nutrients set right and that I can build a solid foundation on top of that.
Yeah. And I think it's also a lot of the data we have on, oh, you get this much magnesium from your food is also pretty old data, and it's probably not that accurate anymore because we've depleted our soils and yeah, we see levels of magnesium going down. I remember in college, I was taking one course, and the professor was a zinc researcher, and he said, globally, we've just seen zinc levels plummet. Like foods that should contain zinc are not containing nearly enough zinc anymore, and that's causing huge issues. And then you
Nobody's
can
using
just
regenerative farming anymore.
no,
It's I think big industry has kind of just stripped away a lot of those traditional knowledges that have been used in the effort of short-term profit.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I think people really don't realize just how depleted a lot of the soil is on these huge farms.
yeah,
Until you go outside of the US often, which is also something that's related to like the ease of accessing pharmaceuticals and the amount of pharmaceuticals you might get prescribed from your doctor for a particular problem. I mean, in the US, it's like, yeah, let's just give this a try. Let's maybe add something else. Maybe you have a side effect. We'll just do more and more and more and see what we can send you home with. That's completely different outside of the US
Right.
when you go to the doctor. And it's also a completely different lifestyle when you're eating outside the US because most of the time our meals consist of whole grains of some kind and vegetables and
Yeah.
olive oil or butter. And not to say
Cheese.
that you can, yeah, but like really, really just food with a lot of substance and food with a lot of fiber and food that you can really feel. You really feel a different kind of satiation. Um, and even when we shop at just like a regular grocery store compared to a farmer's market, we feel the difference just in our digestion. Um, so there's even that much of a difference here with like grocery store quality food compared to food that's being grown more locally. Um, so yeah, if you only have access to grocery store produce, you probably need infinigreens, even if you're making salads, even if you're eating a lot of greens, because we don't have the ability to test a bunch of kale from Whole Foods. We don't know what's in the kale. Like it's good to see the colors on your plate, but at the end of the day, as time goes on, I think we're gonna all people are going to run into this issue of lacking nutrients.
Yeah.
Well, we had someone, we sell Avigenin, and someone said, hey, there's a USDA paper saying there's X% of Avigenin in parsley. Why don't I just go to the store and buy parsley? And as a joke, we're like, okay. And we went down and bought parsley from the grocery store and ran it through the lab, and we found nowhere near the Avigenin that this paper said there was. So, is that depletion? Is that the paper was wrong? People see science and they go, okay, well, I can just do this, but they don't have the lab facilities to actually go in and verify, well, does it actually contain what this paper says it does?
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the parsley that we bought was maybe like hydroponic parsley or something like that, and it was just missing some bacteria in the soil or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the grocery store doesn't know, the farmers don't know, nobody's doing that sort of level of testing because consumers aren't demanding for apigenin content in their parsley.
No,
Yeah.
That's where supplements come in. Everybody says, why don't you just eat foods? Sure, if you can get access to good foods with these compounds in it and you know how much you're getting, do it. By all means, do it through your diet.
Yeah.
yeah,
But we just know most Americans can't.
No.
no.
And I think also most Europeans can't unless you're living in the countryside in Italy somewhere or
Growing your own food
yeah.
or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and you can't expect to know exactly what's in your food from the grocery store, and it's probably way too complex and too expensive for a farmer to do that at any point of the process.
Yeah.
But that's why it's even more important that the supplements are what they claim, because if the supplement industry is the only option to really, yeah, get those missing pieces, and you don't get what the product claims, then all hope is truly lost, which it's not, thankfully. But that's really like that's the end of the line, right?
Yeah. Well, and again, back to my point, a lot of what we're doing is because I want access to things so that I know I'm taking this, I know it has this, so that I can have a good foundation for my own health and my wife and my son.
Yeah.
But that's it. Consistency is also a big part of it too. With Infinigreens, it's always going to have exactly what we say every single time you take a scoop of it. It's the same as a scoop you took 2 years prior.
Yeah.
Where if you can get it from food, the consistency in the food isn't going to be the same because farmers aren't holding to those standards unless you're very lucky and you have access to a farmer that does.
Hmm. Yeah.
We're going to be doing kind of a repackaging rebrand, and I have some samples here that we can tease people with.
Yeah.
So our bottles, they have the brain design on them. They're very unique, right? You can always spot our bottle from across the room, and it's us. They're not super efficient, and they don't have the quality feel that I think is warranted for the amount of effort that we put into our products. So we want our products to look as high quality and as premium as they actually are based on the effort that we're doing. And our current bottles just don't do that. So hopefully everybody agrees, but here is a Yuri Comax bottle.
Looks awesome.
Super.
And again, this is a test print, so it's not finalized, but you can kind of see we have custom bottles. All of our bottles are going to be child-resistant caps too, because I have a 2-year-old son now, and he gets into everything. And at the very least, I don't want pills all over the ground, but I also don't want him eating a bunch of supplements that might cause problem for him. So I figured it would be good if I'm going through it. I know other parents that are customers of ours are going through it. So all of our bottles are going to move to child-resistant caps. And then you can kind of see here's Max.
Wow, nice.
That looks great.
And we're moving towards, on the labels, the 4 bullet points, the 4 effect tags that we have on our site, because that's another complaint that a lot of people have. If you pick up one of our bottles now that's not Natrium, you don't know what it's for, right? You pick up Tongat, there's nothing on that bottle telling you, okay, what am I taking Tongat for? Where now we're going to move towards very simple 4 bullet points that match the exact effect tags that we have on the site. That way consumers can know, okay, why am I taking Uricomax? Hormones, muscle mass, physical energy. Got it. Why am I taking Arenimax? Neuroprotection, cognition, memory. Makes it very clear, especially for the average consumers that maybe don't know the science as much. They can look at their bottle and reference, okay, these are the effects I'm getting from this product.
Yeah.
This also makes it much easier to share with people.
Just going to mention that too.
Recommending it to your parents or your family members. If people are curious about it, you have on the bottle itself exactly what it's going to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And we did have a comment before on our Mushroom Magic drinks, especially. They were embarrassed to give it as a present to one of their friends just because we have some dad jokes on there, and it doesn't feel as premium as they would have wanted it to. So in that specific scenario, the guy went out and bought a different product that was worse because the jar looks nicer and it felt more premium when he handed it to his family member as a present. So I don't want that. I want people to, when they're holding our products, to feel like it's as premium and be as proud of the products as we are with the level of effort and everything that we put into them.
Yeah.
So hopefully everybody's gonna like the new design.
They look awesome.
Yeah, you haven't seen it at all yet, right?
No, I haven't seen it at all.
Yeah.
Super sweet.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Emil and I have seen every single step of the process, so it's been really cool. Different part of the supplement development process than we normally get to see. So.
Yeah. Although this is the first time, at least I'm seeing it like on an actual bottle, and
and if you see, there's going to be QR codes on every bottle now too, which is going to take you to the COA section on the site for that specific product. So you'll be able to take your phone out, scan that, and go right to where the COA is for your specific lot.
Awesome.
That's great.
We've put a lot of effort into our site redesign and just going back to the drawing board and rethinking how have we been doing things for 12 years now, and how do we improve it? And I'm pretty proud of what we've done on the site to make it more usable, more easier to find products if you're an average consumer that doesn't know what they're looking for. Because before, it's still confusing. We have hundreds of products, so if you don't know what you're looking for, it can take some time. But with our new site, if you hear, okay, Nootropics Depot sounds great, I want to take some supplements, and you go to our site and you go, all right, what do I take? Now you have a path to be able to find, okay, here are the products that I should try first, and here's what their effects are, and here's why, and here's the lab testing. Oh, and here's the research snapshot showing the state of the scientific research based on those effect claims. And I think, Emil, you and I have had this conversation. Our new process is really holding us more accountable to the science. Before we would get certain effects from certain products, and then we would tell people this is the effect you're going to get. And a lot of it was based on anecdotes, where now we're really trying to circle back to the published scientific research, so that if we make a claim on a product as far as effect goes, you know exactly how much scientific evidence there is for that claim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being on the scientific advisory board, there are times where there's a claim listed and I look at the research and I say, I don't buy it. Like, you might feel it, but I don't buy it based on the research. And then we go back and reevaluate and make changes.
We change the claim.
Yeah.
Or we find new papers, or, we it's a collaborative effort. And I think a lot of brands out there, you'll see certain brands that are sponsored by doctors, but there's no substance behind what is that doctor doing? How is he evaluating the products? How do you know that it's not just a guy wearing a lab coat going, oh yeah, this is a good brand? So when we created our scientific advisory board, I wanted it to be real and substantive and actually do something other than just window dressing. And I think we've done a really good job of that. That's why we have a very diverse set of people on our scientific advisory board too, people with different levels of experience, so that Carrie, as an ethnobotanist and herbalist, might have a different opinion than Lance as a PhD in nutrition, or Ellie, who is looking at the analytical side and going, how do we approve these claims? And we have a double board certified doctor as well, doctor of obstetrics.
I don't
Ob-
know.
a DO, but more holistic doctor that prescribes drugs and does all the stuff that a normal doctor does, but also looks at nutrition and looks at your overall holistic health. And I wanted to create a team of people that would all bring something unique to the equation. And they do. This is not just a rubber stamping. Oh yeah, you say there's neuroprotection with Arenimax. Okay. It's very much a conversation that happens in the background and go, okay, well, which papers are you referencing? I don't think this paper is saying what the abstract says it is. And it really holds us accountable, and it forces us to look at the science in much more detail. It's a lot more work.
I mean, I can say personally, I wouldn't put my name behind something I don't trust. So be on the board. I'm reading every paper. I'm putting a lot of effort into it. It's really, I'm approving things because I approve them, not I don't want my name on something that I don't really believe in. And I would assume the other board members feel the same. So
Right. And that's what I want for everybody that works for me. I'm the same way. I'm not going to put my name behind something unless I believe in it. And I want other people that come on this mission with me to feel the same way. This isn't a rubber stamp. This isn't a marketing exercise. This is very much, we want to let the science lead the way.
Yeah.
And if the science doesn't exist, then we go out and create it.
Yeah.
We do the science ourselves.
We're doing more and more of that every day. Now with the cell culture lab on the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Very exciting.
Yeah.
That's what I'm passionate about. That's what really gets me fired up. I really like the design. I like the, releasing really cool products. I like taking the products, but my real passion is the science and the lab and pushing that forward. So you can probably hear it when I talk about it, and when I start getting into those sorts of discussions, that's when I'm really excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a lot of exciting things coming up.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the pipeline is stacked.
Yeah.
yes, please don't give me any more ideas. Please.
Yeah, that's one thing we don't have a shortage of is ideas and projects.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Well, we've gotten much wider and broader than just Shodan.
Like every conversation that
Like
I
every conversation,
Yeah.
of
Right.
course. But it's great because now hopefully if you've made it to the end, thanks for listening. Now maybe you have some more inspiration and motivation to go check out um, all of the testing behind these four different ashwagandha products that we actually carry, because there's a lot there, and I hope you understand a little bit more of what we're actually talking about when we talk about the standardizations and when we talk about the differences between the extracts and the parts of the plant. There's a lot to learn, but that also makes it more than just a pill that you take on a daily basis. It makes it something that, hopefully enriches your life and connects you more to nature and makes you realize just how important your health is. And it's not just you that's involved in that, it's also all of the things that you consume. So thanks everyone for listening to this podcast, and thanks for trying these products and giving us your experiences with them, the pros and the cons, because all of that information helps us develop new supplements that are what you're looking for, and it helps us uncover more science and more problems to solve, which is actually the whole point of the mission. Um, and thanks so much, Paul, for finally coming on
Yeah.
the podcast. It's great to see your face.
Yeah.
And
Nice to finally come on. Only took
yeah,
12 years, but
Yeah.
I don't like to rush into things.
yeah, it's perfect. Slow and steady. That's the whole goal. Um,
Yeah. Well,
oh,
and I do want to say thanks to our customers as well. Our mission wouldn't be possible without the support that we've gotten over the years. And we do have a very, very loyal core group of customers that if we didn't have, I probably still wouldn't be in this industry. So thank you. Thank you for all that support over the years.
Absolutely.
well, with that being said, I think it's time to conclude.
Yeah.
Um, so thanks again. We're coming back next month with a new topic, lots of research to share. And if you aren't subscribed to all of our different streaming platforms, channels, you should definitely click subscribe so that you can be informed of the next podcast. And of course, there's always action on Reddit. Our subreddit is r/Nootropics Depot. So please join us on our mission to make the supplement industry much better and to uncover all of the science behind it. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Bye.
See ya.